So, good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Distance 41. Why we can't have nice things. Totally original stream. We've never done this before. I know why I can't have nice things. And I can't have nice podcasts, apparently, because my computer has a penguin infestation that I haven't been able to get rid of. So, for this stream, I guess, at least now, I am streaming off my wife's Windows machine. Yeah, guys. So for people who are coming in early, I'm pushing this one in, or pulling this one in a little bit. I'm going to have a longer distance. This is essentially a makeup stream for, I'd like to say, the boomer mishap that happened on Monday. As far as I can figure, what I experienced was a total failure of OBS, largely owing to the fact that the Linux client version of OBS doesn't automatically update, leading me to think that some feature of the YouTube API wasn't matching up with my OBS API, and it was essentially booting me after an hour of streaming into the system. So, I don't know. All my systems run Linux right now, or all the systems that I can take into a room that gets reliable internet. So, until that problem is fixed, I'm basically sitting here streaming on my wife's computer. But we'll go the distance this time. At least 3 hours. I'm going to answer all the super chats. I'm going to get through the talk, the entirety of the talk. I don't know how much I'm going to have to repeat myself here. Probably a little bit, actually. Probably a little bit. Things have happened since Monday, although not stuff I've ever really been involved with. Life is kind of strange. As people know, I'm kind of in a weird middle point in my life. I've been trying to get back into video making. I've been trying to get back into video essay writing. But having a family, being fairly busy with that, I don't know. It seems like it kind of goes back and forth with the amount of availability that I have to make videos, especially when I lose entire 3-hour blocks of time podcasting and then re-podcasting the same thing over and over again, and then having OBS essentially terminate the feed because the versioning isn't matched up with YouTube's API. So I don't know what you make of it. I mean, it used to be that this is sort of how my times worked with most of my YouTube career, and I'll just talk about this a little bit so people can filter into the chat before I non-repetitively begin the talk that I had planned today. Originally, when you make a channel, and I made the channel when I didn't have a ton of time back in grad school. When you originally start a YouTube channel, it's really easy to make videos because every single idea is just something that you want to talk about right then and there. You have a lot of, typically you make a channel because you have a lot of objections building up that you've been thinking about for a really long time. So you get the ideas, you just make the videos, you just hit publish, and you don't overthink things. And that was more or less how I was between 2016 and 2018. Then, towards the end of 2018, grad school ends, professional life hasn't started yet, child hasn't come yet. Oh my god, I have a huge influx of time. I could do more focused, more directed video projects. And this is where you get sort of the more elaborate things like the Trad Codex series and the gentle introduction to Mencius Molebugs that a lot of people liked. These are very, very focused video projects that I obviously had more of a detailed script for, and that took a long time to sort of gestate and get out there. But since I had a lot of time, it wasn't a big deal. These days, I don't have a lot of time. You have a flop like happened on Monday night, and that's like 40 to 50% of the time I generally have to make videos or online content of any kind in a given week. And so what tends to happen is that you get ideas for videos, and as opposed to making them right away, they're not simple ideas. They're not like early distributed videos where I just get out the perspective because it doesn't seem like anyone else is saying it. I can't say simple perspectives because I have a career history, right? I'll end up repeating myself. So usually the ideas have to be more developed and gestated. But unlike the period of your life where you had more time to dedicate to this, you take the idea when it's hot in your mind, and then it gestates for like 3 months, and then you're not working from any kind of intuitive notion of what the video idea is. You're working from a huge sprawling legal pad of notes, and because of that, you're trying to piece together in your own mind how you wanted the essay to sound while you're recording it. So it's a lot harder. Okay. Anyway. So someone's asking me why some messages don't go through the chat transcript. Well, so the chat that you see in the window, I'm sorry, I didn't open the chat up yet, but I would imagine YouTube filters some words, and I would imagine that I have some keywords filtered. Eventually, when I turn the chat back on, once I'm done talking the talk, hopefully again, I won't make this too repetitive. I don't know how I can really avoid that. The original videos are going to be unlisted and will be links beneath this one once this talk is done, in case you want to see me talk for an hour and then immediately get cut off as the OBS gets booted out of the YouTube API interface. You can do that by clicking on the links below after this video is done. But after I'm done with the talk, I'll bring back the chat, and that is the entropy chat. So the entropy is set to mirror YouTube, but I don't know. There could be an additional standard, an additional layer that entropy has, where it filters out what it displays from YouTube and what it doesn't. So that being said, people who super chatted me next time or last time, don't worry about it. We'll get to all your super chats. The only problem with the YouTube super chats, at least the ones that aren't echoed through this session's entropy, is that I can't highlight them on the screen. I'll read them out. I'll give all of the due diligence, all of the time that's really owed to someone who spends money to ask me a question, but I'm not going to be able to highlight them on this interface, on this OBS interface. It's funny, OBS is a real gem of a piece of software, and I really do appreciate it, but either I don't know the software very well, I don't know how to maintain it on Linux, or the thing's got a lot of bugs as it interfaces with the YouTube API. I imagine there's this continuous problem with a lot of open source software. One of my favorite pieces of open source software, at least for my vlogging career, has been the YouTube-DL command on the Unix prompt that allows you to very, very seamlessly download YouTube videos without going through any of those scam sites. But the problem with that is you have to continuously sudo apt update it, or the YouTube API is naturally going to change, and then YouTube DL is not going to work anymore. And I think that's what happened with OBS. There's sort of an incentive to constantly change the YouTube API interface so that third-party apps have to constantly update to integrate with you. This sort of discourages third-party aggregators from creating sort of aggregation social media sites that would really seriously compromise Google and Facebook and Twitter's ability to capitalize on ads and other attempts to monetize their social networks. So, this is why people like me call for open standards. But I already caught myself digressing. So, we'll go through this talk. We'll answer the super chats. The talk might be a little shorter than it would be otherwise, because I think I might be tempted to not digress as much as I was on Monday evening when I originally tried to do this. But with that being said, the subject of this talk, this vlog, this distance, is why we can't have nice things yet. Once more, I'm kind of drawn in most of these distance series to talk about the state of play, the state of internet dialectic. And I've been really interested, a lot of people have been really interested to understand what is the Joe Biden or the Biden presidency's online dynamic. With the election of Donald Trump, for the first few years, we had the ascendancy of right-wing content creators, and really only for the first year, really only for the early part of 2017. And from 2018 onwards, we saw the slow motion collapse of the right wing, both through some of its activist incoherency and mistakes, but also just due to outright bannings that have come across social media. And a lot of people like me and other people on the distant right have speculated that we would see a different change in dynamics coming down the line in 2021 if Biden was to win. And this started with sort of the new sensation that hit YouTube in 2020, or 2019, I suppose is more accurate. And that would be, pardon me, that would be BreadTube. Now, of course, I probably am one of the only right-wingers that really watches BreadTube consistently. But these guys were a phenomenon starting, I think they really started in 2019 properly. That's when you first started to get the understanding that there was not just old school internet personalities that happened to be progressive, but people that did progressive and distant progressive politics explicitly on YouTube in more or less the same way that the Gamergaters and the right-wingers did from 2015 to 2018. And so a while I was really kind of fascinated with these characters for a variety of reasons. One was that they were just more supported by the mainstream, and we might go over this distinction as I talk about these people. But more so because the new people that were coming on the scene, the Thought Slimes, the Voshes, the America Johnsons, were just the strangest, weirdest, and I don't know, I don't want to use the word degenerate, but that would kind of capture the emotion I have looking at most of them. The people coming onto BreadTube and calling themselves BreadTube did not seem in any way, shape, or form to be well-adjusted individuals. They seemed to sort of exhibit every stereotype of the progressive side. They were largely white, they were largely male when you really got down to their biology, but almost every one of them had a way of not being white and male. Transgenderism was a huge thing in BreadTube. I think very few content creators describe themselves as being straight, white, cisgendered, and male. Vosh, I believe, called himself bisexual or something, although his sexuality seems to go in much, much darker directions if you're aware of his internet backchat. And what he talks about on his Discord server, I'm not going to bring that up. This is a family-rated stream, I'd like to think. Thought Slime obviously was non-binary. ContraPoints was trans. And for all the people who in 2019 were telling me that Oliver Thorne from PhilosophyTube was the one straight white male to really show that you can make it as a white guy on YouTube. Well, in 2021, the guy is a woman now. So here we are, a really weird group of people. But in the early months of spring 2021, as the Biden administration settles in on itself, what we have witnessed is nothing less than the slow motion downfall, or as I prefer to say, the slow motion Untergang of BreadTube, the slow motion undergoing of BreadTube. Week after week, day after day, the news coming out of any of these channels has been outright humiliating. I don't really follow these people in the sense that I watch their videos, but I kind of keep my ear to the ground, watch the first 5 minutes. I want to see what they're talking about, and I do, as a guilty pleasure, every Sunday afternoon, which is our cleaning day at the Distributist household. I do put on Adam and PSA Sitch's podcast, which usually goes on for 11 hours, but of which I can stand to listen to usually the first 2 while I'm cleaning. I put that on in the background and listen to it, and that's usually, I mean, if we're honest, for all the shit people give me about watching and knowing about BreadTubers, Adam and PSA Sitch's podcast is more or less This Week in Stupid BreadTube review. And so if you're genuinely aware of this and you understand what's going on, everyone on the left side of the internet has just been making complete fools of themselves for the last 2 months at least. You have a lot of people like Vosh admitting that they spread lies for political gain. They have no compunction about making an enormous amount of money for people who earn less money than they do for essentially talking to a machine, and they still complain about capitalism. Really, at this age, I don't know how you can't describe someone like Vosh as a grifter. Maybe we've changed the definition of grifter. Maybe grifter means someone who identifies as a grifter and nothing else. It's one of these totally vacuous definitions. But even that, I mean, even beyond the sort of cringe of the week that usually comes out of streaming communities like Vosh and Xanderhall and Demon Mama, it just goes at a deeper level. You have, from the old school, you have Lindsay Ellis. Lindsay Ellis, I could have included ContraPoints here too, because Lindsay Ellis and ContraPoints are, as they've come to exist in the present year, they are basically the same person. All their videos are on the same things. Their intonations, their jokes are the same set of jokes, and even their problems with applying makeup and having believable facial feminization seems to be overlapping. And so the contradiction from this era, and Lindsay Ellis is one of these people who's been on the internet forever, prior to YouTube. The problem with these people's content is it seems to be oscillating between two poles. At one hand, they endlessly complain about how not enough transphobes, specifically J.K. Rowling, are canceled. Believe it or not, there are still a lot of feminists who still think a woman means adult biological female, and are a little bit, they're a little bit worried that the sudden influx of trans people into women's spaces isn't going to cause maybe some problem down the line. And not only can we not address this with any kind of institutional segregation that will allow biological women to have their own places, people are being punished even for talking about it. I mean, shock horror, there seems to be some kind of censorship going on. But no. See, even mentioning that is verboten. And Agent Lindsay Ellis and Natalie Wynn are on the case. They're making sure that J.K. Rowling goes down and goes down hard. And so this is how it's going to go. And that was their grift in December, November, January of the past few months. I should say November, December of 2020, January of 2021, until, as inevitably happens, the mob comes for them. And so what you have in quick succession is complaining about people not getting canceled enough, and then complaining about yourself getting canceled and complaining that it goes too far. And what you have coming out of these people is just a complete lack of self-awareness. The videos that Lindsay Ellis has made, they're way too long for me to watch all the way through, but I caught pretty much all of it on the Friended PSA-SH stream. And you're just sort of sinking into yourself while you're doing your chores, listening to this stuff, because there just seems to be no ability to critically examine the ideology that she's adhering to. It's a pile of humble brags. It's a pile of transparent narcissism. It's a huge heap of unexamined double standards and statements that don't even make any sense. And you keep on wondering, how can people think like this? Is this even some kind of honest discord? Does even Lindsay Ellis believe this? Or does she simply believe that this is what she has to say in order to accrue the maximum amount of social media clout? Is she simply trying to ride the Twitter bandwagon, be the slave of the mob for likes and circulation and climbing up the corporate ladder? I mean, that's what it seems to me to be. But then, I mean, aside from being a really old figure on the internet, why do people ultimately listen to Lindsay Ellis when it comes to politics, other than the fact that she's one of the OG people who made videos on culture? And of course, this only got worse with things like Professor Wolf and his interactions with the YouTuber Destiny. Now, again, Professor Wolf is an old school academic. He's one of the hard-boiled. I don't know, he kind of affects the qualities of people who are of an older generation, probably the silent generation or the greatest generation, but he's transparently himself a boomer. He comes out of the 1960s, and he's been around in leftist circles forever. But insofar as there was an intellectual core to BreadTube, his ideas of co-ops and moralistic anti-capitalism was sort of the height of intellectual critiques, and an indication about why BreadTube is simply a more serious political entity than is any of the reactionary channels that originally were their rivals and now are simply part of YouTube history, since every one of us, or at least not me yet, has gotten banned. And of course, Destiny, also a leftist YouTuber, but one that's of a more moderate variety, gets Richard Wolff onto a debate, and he asks the same questions that every single person who's ever been on the opposite end of a communism, socialism / capitalism debate asks. He tries to end the equivocation and get to the bottom of what Richard Wolff actually means by socialism. And you just get the most ridiculous answers. They belie complete inability of Richard Wolff both to define his terms consistently, to describe economics in a way that's descriptive rather than moralizing, and even get core understandings of how capitalism works correct. At one point, it came up in the conversation that Richard Wolff seemingly didn't understand what it meant for a corporation to have a fiduciary duty to its shareholders to increase their stock value and increase the profit they make from holding that stock. I don't know. I mean, this is something that I'm sure that Richard Wolff at some level is aware of this, but for whatever reason, for the purposes of the dialectic and the conversation and the rhetoric he was using, he had to be, as his voice implied, a complete idiot. I remember about a year back, Morgoth had he did this great series called the Archetypes of the Leftist, where he went over all these different types of archetypes of leftists, and one of them was the abomination, sort of what I was talking about earlier, the kind of people who are living these obviously degenerate and nihilistic lifestyles that would have been totally frowned upon in any previous age, but are somehow accepted by the left in a way that is strange. My wife just walked in. The other one, the other archetype he mentioned that kind of comes to mind with Richard Wolff is Morgoth's understanding of the hatchling. And the hatchling is sort of a tactical perspective that a lot of leftists take. You'll see this with a lot of more minor YouTubers, is you get them on a controversial issue, and after they sort of give you the talking points that come along with most leftist lines, they just hard tap out. And it seems that they're totally incapable of following a line of logic independently once you sort of get them off the reservation and start talking about things in full. And not only that, it seems like they have no contact with the outside world. And Richard Wolff, he perfectly exhibits this, because every time he speaks, he talks like he is an idiot. He talks like either he or the person he's talking to is suffering from some deep learning disability. And he has to talk like, I'm very, very slow, and I talk like this, and I have an overly exaggerated tone, and all this stuff. And I don't know, this might be a pet peeve of mine, but whenever I hear this coming from anybody, whether I know it's affected or not, I consider it to be insulting. And so, he immediately lost me on that point, if nothing else. But, and I know here I'm kind of repeating myself, because I literally told this story on the first or two times this stream failed. The thing that sort of stands out in my mind about Richard Wolff's talk with Destiny is the fact that towards the end of his conversation, the moderator, who is Lance from the Serfs, which is another ridiculous and really, really stupid leftist YouTube or BreadTube YouTube channel, leftist and BreadTube are the same thing, he pitches Richard one of the most softball questions you can imagine. The classic softball question you might get in any kind of freshman's economic seminar, where Richard Wolff is trying to sell you on why you need to become a socialist advocate, why you need to dedicate your life to your Lord and Savior Karl Marx. So Lance reads a question which I think he wrote himself. Well, under socialism, can I still keep my PlayStation 4? And of course, as I've said before, and I know that I'm repeating this, there are several good ways to answer this question. The sort of based, hard-lined, red-pilled way. Red-pilled both in the communist sense and also the reactionary sense. Not something I necessarily agree with, but some answer I definitely would respect. An answer like that would be, absolutely not. The revolution is coming for your decadent PlayStation 4s, and we're going to burn them in a giant bonfire and dedicate the ashes to the glories of the proletariat revolution. And you could point out all the while that organizing your life around entertainment systems and electronic stimulus, and even caring about a material console system when the entire spiritual and economic system that you live in is being redesigned is just the height of decadence. You could go that way, and I would sympathize with it. I'm not against video games writ large. I understand them to be very, very poisonous to a large degree. I severely limit them in my own life. I don't play AAA video games, and did a fly on me for some reason. I don't play AAA video games, and I kind of quit. I kind of catch myself whenever I fall into these patterns, but I do believe you can reconcile a certain number of nerdy hobbies with a productive life. We do need to have some space for leisure, and I think as long as it's kept away from your core identity and your core understanding of yourself, there is a place for entertainment, even pure entertainment. But that based, we're taking away your PlayStation 4s. That would be a respectable answer, and I would really admire the cojones on Professor Wolf if he went full Stalinist and dropped that line on the chat. The other way to go, the more BreadTube way, the more focus grouped, approved way, and certainly the answer that I think a Vosh or a Thought Slime or a Demon Mama would have immediately pulled right out of the ether, right out of their asses if they were confronted with the same problem, is to say, well, hey guys, under socialism, we'll be so rich you'll be able to afford 100 PlayStation 4s. You'll be able to afford 100 PlayStation 400s, which each are 400 times more fun and addictive than PlayStation 4. Again, I don't know why we necessarily need a piece of technology that's more addictive and more fun and more enthralling than the PlayStation 4. To a certain degree, I kind of like that the PlayStation's addictive qualities are truncated by the limits of our own technology. I think that's a benefit. But indeed, if you were pitching to the audience, that answer would have been probably optimal or very, very close to optimal. Of course, Richard Wolff doesn't give this answer either. Instead, Lord help me, he gives the worst answer, and he goes, well, of course you can have a PlayStation 4. You just have to go to your workplace democracy and explain to all your coworkers that you want and you need a PlayStation 4, and if they think that you need it enough, they'll obviously vote for it because you're all in a democracy together, and that's how democracies work. They get people that they need. I'm trying to do his talking like an idiot voice. This is not an ethnic joke of any kind. I don't even think... Well, if people are thinking I'm making an ethnic joke that get me banned from YouTube, I don't even think Richard Wolff necessarily falls into that group. But at any rate, he talks with a kind of New York accent that is... might not be kosher for YouTube. I think he might be. I think he actually is Italian or German or something like that. But that's neither here nor there. His answer is essentially, though, that in order to get a PlayStation 4, you literally have to lobby for it in the democratic process. And for my own money, this is the most ridiculous answer, because it directly mirrors an experience that I had living in a housing co-op in college. Again, I have to caution everyone, if you bring up housing co-ops in college, even if you were part of a housing co-op in college, socialists will shoot you down. They'll give you the line that housing co-ops aren't real socialism. And to an extent, for the most part, when we talk about housing co-ops, they're nothing like socialism, because most housing co-ops, as they exist in major metropolitan areas, aren't really co-ops of any variety. They're more like you co-own an apartment building and you co-manage the community that exists in the apartment building, but you're still very much property owners. You're just sort of joint stockholders in this property that you're managing and maintaining. College co-ops, however, they're not exactly like that. They're much closer to their socialist inspirations. You pay rent to the co-op, but the space you get from a co-op room is typically much, much smaller than you could ordinarily get from some kind of commercial endeavor. So your rent is essentially taken, and part of it's used to maintain the buildings and pay co-op employees, and there's no profit that's directly made because indeed this is a co-op. Everything is paid back either to the co-op employees who work to maintain the financials or the property of the co-op itself. But in addition to that, funds that don't directly go to pay taxes and maintenance and co-op employee salaries get put into what's generally called a house fund or a house pool. And this is the money that the co-op has earmarked for whatever the students want to spend it on collectively. Usually some form of entertainment or events, sometimes activism. But this is completely to the discretion of the students. It is not for food, it's not for essential maintenance, it's not for paying rent and essential fees that go to the financials of the co-op or to taxes or anything else like that. This is purely discretional. And so, me being in this co-op, the thing that's burned into my mind that made me immediately see not simply the flaws of socialism, but the flaws of democracy, was a vote that was brought to the floor over a PlayStation. And I think back then it was PlayStation 3. I think we were past the point of PlayStation 2, and certainly not yet in the era of PlayStation 4. But I'm not a console person, and I don't even really play video games anymore. Let's just say PlayStation 3 for sake of the argument. And a large number of people in this housing co-op liked playing console games, and they wanted to buy a PlayStation 3 for the house using the money that they themselves paid into their rent. Again, additional funds that don't really justify the amount of space they're occupying if you compared it to other commercially competitive environments. Okay, simple enough, right? PlayStation 3s, at least back then, didn't cost very much. They weren't very much money. They were a minuscule amount of the total house budget, and a significant minority of people really, 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 really wanted this expenditure. By any kind of reasonable estimation of democracy, if we were using the idealistic notion of democracy that Richard Wolff uses, this interaction would be a no-brainer. You obviously would be able to purchase this amenity, right? Well, actually, no, because what you didn't take into account were politics, and indeed the politics of power, which I sort of learned the hard way, even though I wasn't myself particularly invested in buying a PlayStation 3. I didn't really care. But what became immediately apparent is that managing the house budget and preventing people from buying things that you thought ideologically were bad was a form of power. For most of the people who were really into the democratic process and the socialist experiment, PlayStation 3 was the ne plus ultra of sort of bourgeoisie, decadent consumer capitalism that was destroying the planet. It was odious to their ideology. It didn't really matter that people wanted it, and moreover, it was sort of an affront to their ideology that people were even entertaining buying it. If a co-op was going to buy consumer goods that the die-hard green socialist wouldn't want to buy, that was an indication that the democratic process wasn't ruled by their ideology. So, because they thought that this was decadent and superfluous, they slowly started a campaign to convince everyone, even the people who didn't care one way or the other, that this item, the PlayStation 3, was decadent and superfluous. And if you voted for it, you were essentially voting for a decadent and superfluous thing that was killing the planet. And I don't know, what is it? It's almost stealing, right? Because you paid into the pot of money, right? And now it's being used to buy a PlayStation 3. And so by organizing this and essentially nixing the purchase of the PlayStation 3, robbing a lot of pleasure from a lot of people who wanted it, these ideologues were able to demonstrate the power of their ideology. It could destroy something someone else wanted. And so the next time someone wanted any kind of consumer good, that consumer good had to kind of be put into the language of these democratic stakeholders. It had to be kind of put into the language of the reigning ideology and then justified in the language of that ideology. So I'm sure that they might have been able to get the PlayStation 3 if they had come to said same operators, said same pseudo-democratic leaders, and said something like, well, one of us is an oppressed minority, one of us is African American, and if you deny him this consumer goods, you're really denying him the ability to participate as an equal member of society, because he's trying to get this PlayStation 3 that in our oppressive society would be denied to him because he's an African American. If you put it that way, you might have actually been able to get the PlayStation 3. But that's not the point. The point is that all consumer decisions had to essentially kneel before the reigning democratic ideology and the representatives of that reigning democratic ideology. You had to flatter the mob, and you had to flatter the mob's ideology in order to get what you wanted. And so what ultimately was the House budget spent on? Well, the House budget was spent on a bunch of events, a bunch of parties, more or less. We didn't call them that, but that's what they were. And these were events that almost nobody attended. They all had sort of social justice themes. They were all about some pertinent political issue that we really needed to care about. Sometimes they were more or less seminars that would teach us about, again, I don't think white privilege was a thing. It wasn't this hot button an issue way back then, but it was always supposed to educate us about some leftist hot button issue. And ultimately, no one attended them, and no one but a very, very small niche of political democratic operators even really cared. And so it became a giant project to flatter these people's egos and didn't even really deliver any product. So I don't know. I mean, I guess, I digressed. I digressed via plan because I knew I talked about this last time and I had to mention this again, considering this is the video that's going to stay up. But between Thought Slime admitting that he's just an entertainer and not really into politics, among all of the Voshes and Demon Mamas essentially admitting here and there that they don't really care about ideas or truthfulness as long as it supports the cause, among the Lindsay Ellises outing themselves as transparent narcissists, and the Richard Wolffs of the world showing that they have no understanding either of how to explain or even to sell their own ideology, I really question whether anybody who watches BreadTube and who's not caught up in some kind of ideological bubble or some parasocial relationship, how is anyone taking this seriously? Everyone in this group seems to be transparently running a grift or have no idea what they're talking about, or in some advanced state of a psychological decay or borderline personality or just plain old narcissism. Certainly, in any realistic environment, this is the downfall of BreadTube. They're telling you that they're not serious. They're telling you that they're grifting you. But people keep on subscribing. And that's because, in broad strokes, there really isn't a right wing anymore. A lot of the people here I have, the two of them on top, Stefan Molyneux and Molyneux Woes, are literally banned off of YouTube. Academic Agent and Keith Woods and myself, we're still standing, but again, for how long? Ordinarily, if there was such a humiliating set of events for any given political YouTube or online community, you would assume that there would be a reciprocal interest in their opposition. But there isn't. Because at this stage, both inside social media and also politically, I think it's almost universally recognized that not only hasn't the right won, the right is not something that is even capable of receiving political power. There's no point in really patronizing right-wingers in the same way that people patronize left-wingers, because regardless of the strength of their arguments, they will be, dialectically speaking, in the view of the algorithm and in the social approval of people who are influenced by said algorithm, they will be perceived to be the losers. They are the designated losers by design of the system itself. And as such, again, as compelling as their dialectic, as logical and as reasonable as their arguments might be, they can't use the platforms of social media to get power. They can never get more clout than leftist streamers. They can never whine harder than the progressive victim groups. And they'll never get the institutional support that someone like a Lindsay Ellis or a Natalie Wynn does. And so they exist in this environment as shadows. I exist in this environment as a shadow. I exist as someone who for all intents and purposes, is pre-banned. I tell people this and they don't believe me, but I mean, eventually it will happen. Maybe the ban hammer is going to be quieted down for a few more years. It's going to fall dormant and people are going to forget that people like me exist. People like me, an academic agent, and Keith Woods will kind of recede into the background. But eventually there's going to be a populist scare, and this time they're not going to wait around for someone to get elected president before they start swinging at every social media influencer that has more than a hill of followers on any mainstream platform. And by that time, I think I almost certainly will be taken down. So in some sense, we can't win, and we can't even be seen as a viable alternative, because that's not really the thing that we are anymore. We aren't the kind of thing that can participate in a clout-driven social media environment. We can't compete for likes. We can't compete in the game of trying to flatter the demos, or worse yet, flatter the ideological manners of the ideology that has been selected as the new religion of the demos. And I'm sorry, guys, I have a huge fly that's continuously flying in my face. Here we have these huge, people used to call them mosquito hawks. I forget what they're actually called, what their scientific name is, but they are the most irritating insect on this planet. They're like giant mosquitoes, and all they exist to do is run into your face at high speed. Yeah, and they're not easy to ignore. So if you see me slapping my face or doing this, please forgive me. Even though in the middle of the point. Okay, are we ready? Because this time, 3 days ago, this is where Mr. Linux OBS version and Mr. YouTube API decided that they were no longer friends anymore, and they just had to boot me off the entire system. So if everyone in the chat is still on board and is still hearing me talk and can allow me to finish the second part of this little talk that I had planned, then let's just go for it. Let's power through this entire thing, right? I'm not saying F's in the chat. So hot damn, the penguin infestation has been stopped. Microsoft Windows, I love you. Bill Gates, if you weren't trying to block out the sun, Mr. Burns style, and purchase all of the farmland in my country so we could be serfs again, I would say you genuinely have my back on this one, because your version of OBS has support and the Linux one doesn't. So let's go. Where am I going with this? So, as you might be aware if you watch Academic Agent's channel, I have been looking for some new direction, some new mode to go in. And in addition to some of my YouTube video projects, I've been doing a lot of writing, and the writing has been mostly in the form of little letters that I'm writing to various online communities, not so much trying to destroy them or to refute their arguments, but more sort of to describe the world as I see it and describe the bounds of our disagreement. And so that we don't have to have the same conversations over and over again. And the first of these letters that I've written out longhand, I'll probably post a recording of them to the YouTube channel. Hey, edited content is edited content, even if it's not, even if it's not a full distributist video of the classic sort. That's my life right now. Not as much time, especially when half of my nights are getting sucked up by failed streams. Pardon me. The most recent one of these letters, I think I might post them also on Substack or something so people can have paper copies. The letter is addressed to sort of the plebeian activists. Again, this is something that Academic Agent was discussing in one of his videos. In the dissident right, there is definitely a division between sort of the older content creators like me, Academic Agent. I'm not so sure if Academic Agent would be comfortable with me grouping millennial woes into this category as well, but also millennial woes. I don't know if Keith Woods would necessarily qualify, but there are a group of more old school right-wing content creators which are really done with popular activism, with trying to game the algorithm and really drive any kind of popular movement in any way, shape, or form. We're really done with that. Not only do we not want to do it, we also don't see it as being something that's particularly viable for any movement that has any other goal than to flatter the mob's preconceptions about how the world works. Something definitively different is needed. And of course, on the opposite side of this is people like Don the Pleb. He is the eunuch. Again, I talked about these people in the last stance, and I don't really want to belabor the point specifically, but they tend to think that we have to ante up and try again. And they have a lot of colorful language describing our unwillingness to ante up and play again in what we think is a rigged game. But that being said, again, I don't want to continuously have this discussion. I want to dissolve the discussion and not to try to front-run my own letter, front-run my own YouTube video that will be coming out in a few days. I'm not really looking for a way of owning people. I'm looking for a way of doing something different, of going in a completely different direction. And this is more or less the direction I've been thinking in recently. So as everyone knows, I don't know, unless you're living in Australia, and I think maybe one of Franklin, so this doesn't apply to you, I'm sorry. But for most of us who are in the Northern Hemisphere, we're moving into spring, and the weather is good. And in the area of California, this is sort of the brief period in between rain and hot that things really seem magical. And being a newer parent, a large amount of my time not dedicated to work and maintenance of various things is dedicated to looking after the kid, and he always wants to go outside, and this kind of forces you to be very present. I might talk about the healthiness of just being with children generally, but going around and really looking at the society you live in as it is, and not through the social goggles of media, and being out in it for hours, it really makes you think in a lot of different ways. I'm not gonna. This isn't the sort of boomerish take that says all of the degeneracy, all of the decline that we talk about is imaginary. Oh, it most certainly isn't. You see the effects of the increased crime rate. You see the effects of people going out less and less, of people participating in community less and less, and the surrounding area of what once used to be almost a utopian place to live, slowly falling into disrepair, slowly becoming something different and much darker. And that's disturbing. But it also refocuses you, right? Because, when I think about this, I don't think about all the bad things. What I think about is when I was a kid, when I was growing up in more or less the same area, and what I had, that I just so want to make sure my child has, and that's not there. And how can I get? I had nice things growing up. I had nice things that gave my life value, and a lot of those nice things aren't even there anymore. I know I'm not unique in this at all, but I can't watch movies anymore. Part of it is that I don't like using my free time sitting down and watching a screen. I always have to be doing something. Even if it's the stupidest nerd hobby imaginable, and I might be forced to talk about this later, my apologies. For my shame, not all my time spent productively, and maybe I should spend more productive time. I don't have a lot of free time, so it's not a lot of time, but still you get the idea. I'm not saying all my time is productive, but for whatever reason, just as me as a person, I don't like spending my free time sitting down. I always want to be building something. I always want to be doing something. And so, I don't watch tons of movies anyway, but just a while back, my wife was watching a Korean movie. And I walk in and I see her watching a Korean movie, and it's obviously subtitled, and I just spend 5 minutes looking at how the characters talk, looking at how the characters hold themselves, seeing how the cinematography is framed, and how there's obvious implicit suspense in the scenes. And I immediately recognize that there is something here that I don't see in Hollywood movies. It's not some kind of shallow piece of crap that's either only designed to contain a trite political message or only designed to appeal to millennials' own sense of vanity. There's deep characters that are really involved in some deeper plot. And there's some kind of plot, there's some kind of issue at stake that could have some amount of meaning, some amount of spiritual meaning. I mean, to think that it's really almost impossible not only to imagine a movie like The Third Man being made in present year, but even a movie like Fight Club being made in present year. It's really hard to imagine something like that coming around and being really, really popular. What are the cult movies that kids get really, really into that might teach them to love cinema for something more than just as a reflection of the actors and the culture and the political biases of the people who create it and fund it? I remember for myself, I used to have a phase in my life where I really, really loved movies. I even really, really loved anime. But I remember the movies that really sold me on it. I remember one year in particular, and that was 1999. And in that year, we had Being John Malkovich, Darren Aronofsky's Pi, and Princess Mononoke. And those three movies in particular just sold me on movies. Princess Mononoke sold me on anime until I realized that, it's not all as original as Princess Mononoke. And things like Being John Malkovich and Darren Aronofsky's Pi sold me on the idea that movies could explore concepts that I never even thought were possible. They could open doors into areas of human exploration that had real meaning. Looking back, do the movies maintain? Yes and no. Being John Malkovich is truly a clever movie. It's a truly good movie, in my opinion. But it's inhabited with this sort of cynicism that writer Charlie Kaufman brings to almost all of his endeavors. It's like Woody Allen, but a little bit worse than that. And I guess I'm much less tolerant of that perspective now than I am currently. So it kind of clangs a little bit, but the movie is genuinely clever. And whatever you say, Darren Aronofsky's Pi. This is, of course, before we realized that Darren Aronofsky could only make one kind of movie and was totally incapable of subtlety. But as unsubtle as the movie Pi is, it's still enthralling. I still love it. And just the notion that there's this conspiracy of Wall Street bankers and Hasidic Jews that are both willing to kill over a math formula, a 2016 letter number. That's just so delicious. I mean, how can you not really sink your teeth into a suspense plot driven by that premise? Shot in stark black and white in New York. I mean, that's just a delicious movie. But they don't make movies like that anymore. We don't have nice things like that. Once my son gets to the age I was in 1999, are there going to be new movies like that? What are the nice things that he'll have? And the conclusion is, and I know this does sound kind of trite, and people are probably tired of hearing this, the motivating cause of any kind of political activism that's done by us here going forward has to be motivated by the desire to see more good things in our futures. I know this sounds like a platitude. I know this sounds like Jordan Peterson. But it's really true. We aren't going to win like Vosh won in 2019. We're not going to win like Sargon won in 2015. This period is over. What we have when we produce here on YouTube or here in any kind of online or physical space is simply the goodness, the beauty, and the truth of the thing that we actually produce. So we have to produce things. We have to create things that are actually worthy of being consumed. It can't be just repetition. It can't be just winning. It can't just be hearing your own biases confirmed. And I don't want to repeat myself. I say this as a person who spent the last hour repeating something that he said 3 days ago, more or less out of technical necessity than the fact that I'm trying to milk you guys for views and super chats. But this is the reality. This is what we have to do. We have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that we're not in the market of winning. We're in the market of making good and worthy things. And we have to go high or go home. Now, I do intend to try to elaborate on this with written essays that will obviously get posted to my channel in the form of at least audio-only videos. But the obvious next step is to do the one thing that BreadTube can't do. I mean, there's a reason why I spent probably a half an hour going down the line in discussing the Untergang of BreadTube, because I mean, probably that I wasn't enlightening anyone, right? You guys all knew that BreadTube was going bust eventually. These people had sort of big personality defects written right across their forehead. You could tell that they're going nowhere, right? You could tell that these people were on the verge of some kind of psychological breakdown the minute their social cloud and their little dopamine hats started to dry up. And I don't advise people to engage in any form of schadenfreude. But for whatever it's worth, if you do consider the downfall of the left to be entertaining, I will predict you'll have a very, very entertaining 2021 and 2022. This is going to be a wild ride for BreadTube as it comes to true terms with the real nature of reality. But that being said, between the streamers and the brain-dead political essayists like Thought Slime and the old-school YouTubers like Lindsay Ellis and ContraPoints and even the aging boomers like Professor Wolf, among all of them, what is the one thing that is missing? What is the one thing that they seem to lack, and which in some ways they couldn't even adopt if they wanted to? And I think that the answer to this question is that the thing that they don't have is an aristocratic temperament. This is the critical thing missing from the left right now. Noblesse oblige. And well, that's sort of the core of it. Nobility and power obligates one. And even not even necessarily the reality of power obligates you to pay it forward. I think the aspiration towards nobility and power obligates you to pay it forward. And this is one thing, again, that the left doesn't have. People People point to older left-wing figures. Noam Chomsky in his prime, less Noam Chomsky now, but Noam Chomsky in his prime, was a true believer. He would sit down and have honest discussions with people like William F. Buckley, which is really surreal in hindsight, because William F. Buckley, I don't consider that engagement with Noam Chomsky to be one of his proudest moments. He kind of comes across as a proto-neocon, in my opinion. And it almost seems like he's speaking on the behalf of other people's interests, where, as deluded as Noam Chomsky is, as blinded as he is by his own utopian ideology, he is speaking from the heart. But when you look at people, when you look at leftists of past eras, whether they're Hermann Hesse, whether they're Kurt Vonnegut, whether they're George Orwell, and then all these people were leftists, is undeniable. What you see is a genuineness, a sincerity, a curiosity, and this all comes together to make them noble. The current crop of leftists can essentially get these people's jobs. They can become the primary speakers and the primary representatives of what it means to be leftists in the new world that is quickly being created before our very eyes. But they're never going to be worthy of filling these people's shoes. And that unworthiness will always dog them. It will always aesthetically destroy their vision. And even the hint of worthiness on the part of some counter-progressive force will be a beacon. It will be a diamond thorn in the side of every progressive, because they'll know at every moment that they are frauds and that they are not actually doing what the heroes of their youth were doing. They will know that they're not being the Noam Chomskys and the Kurt Vonneguts and the George Orwells of 2020. It'll be clear that they're establishment figures. And it will be clear to them, and that's what's really important, that they're running something approaching a grift. And this is probably the real reason why transgenderism is so popular in BreadTube. One's sort of the obvious, is that they're trying to climb the intersectionality hierarchy. They want to get more, as Steve Saylor would put it, oppression Pokemon points. And the easiest way to do that is simply grow your hair out long and call yourself a woman, right? That's an easy way to climb the intersectional hierarchy. That's the typical way of putting it. Here's an alternative explanation, and I want to talk about this more. I don't have this thesis fully developed, but this is part of it that a lot of people don't comment on. To be a leftist that takes themselves seriously in 2021 is to be a person radically disconnected from the physical reality that you live in. It's to be radically connected from your identity as a straight, white, Western person. It's to be radically disconnected from the life that your parents and grandparents lived, from the culture and religion that were bequeathed to you and left at the side of the road. It's even to be disconnected from the physical body you would habit. In some sense, doing the whole streaming thing the way Vosh does is it's very telling, right? I do these streams right now, and I know that as soon as I end this stream, it's sort of a surreal experience. I'm in this zone where I'm talking to the chat, and it's sort of the opposite of being outside with my son, right? Like outside with your child, you're focused. You're noticing your environment. Here, you see this little square around me right here, right? That's your vision. And obviously I'm in a bigger room here. But as far as my brain is concerned, this screen is my existence. It's in my existence for 3 hours. I come off from that, and I'm supremely disembodied for about an hour or so. It's weird. I have to kind of recover from it. Once you live your entire life in front of a screen and on social media and chasing clout, I'm wondering if transgenderism isn't sort of a very next logical step. You've already embraced sort of the Gnostic concept of yourself as something departed from your own body. How hard would it be to adopt a sort of fictional spiritual body in place of what you've lost in the online identity, especially since that fictional spiritual body literally gets you more clout in this little world of approval that we've created in this online space. The digital world is here to stay. That we can't remove that. We can't remove the fact that the digital world exists. we also can't remove the fact that whenever we come toe-to-toe with the left, and it's a contest of popularity, we will always lose. But insofar as we have to participate to this digital world, we need to prioritize health, and we need to prioritize, both in the viewers and in myself, some kind of aristocratic temperament. Maybe this means, and I've considered this for a long time, I know my wife would probably kill me if I did this, this might mean just not taking super chats at all. I mean, I make a little bit of money, right? And obviously, having a few $100s at the end of the month, that really goes a long way to make ends meet, with a new family. But it's not my primary source of income, and I don't need it. What if I just disabled super chats as a symbol that that's not why I'm doing this? I never monetize my videos, So why, it's mercenary. What I'm getting at here is are the qualities of the aristocratic temperament. There are things that the online community, that the online social media space encourages us to do that are just definitively anti-aristocratic. They're definitively anti-aristocratic. And so every one of these things is kind of going against the tide of what these platforms naturally encourage us to do. Again, I wrote these things out. All of these distance things are really incomplete ideas that I'm spitballing, and you're participating with me in this spitballing endeavor. I talk to people so that I can sharpen my ideas against you guys, and I like the pushback. So this is why I do what I do. You have to take my word that I'm not doing this for the grift. Hey, maybe I am a grifter, but this is the thing. Like, I like doing this to get my ideas sharpened. But the aristocratic temperament needs to be cultivated, and because of that, we need to go against the natural tendency of the internet to do all of these things. And this is sort of a short list. The first one is being grasping. Now, I think this is more or less where people started typing F in. Oh, someone super chatted me. I think this is more or less the place where people started typing F in my little chat window because the stream had failed. So as far as I'm concerned, this was the cutoff, and I was just about to drop a bomb that was probably going to get my wife angry at me, but I'm going to give a big write-off that I will name no people involved in this analysis. But a while back, about a month or two ago, my wife and I were driving back from a vacation where we visited our relatives in Canada. Now, my wife and my wife's parents and my parents are at a very, very similar socioeconomic level. They're middle class, and they're very comfortably middle class. Maybe they're even upper middle class. You could call them that, right? Nevertheless, they very, very, very obviously occupy different classes. And I said that it's very obvious, Helen, that my parents are aspiring Brahmins, and your parents are sort of new money, what we would ordinarily recognize as well-off red staters. These are sort of the middle-class personalities writ large. And she, of course, asks why. And I say, well, it's their attitude towards money. I mean, that's really it, right? This is not really a personal judgment. Both my parents and my in-laws are wonderful people. They all have their virtues, and they all have their defects. And they all have their blind spots. No moral judgment here. But it's very, very obvious that when you come from a lower middle class disposition and you come into money, you still have that lower middle class disposition to grasp for money. You see a big shiny thing in front of you and you grasp it. But to an upper class person, even an upper class person that works their entire life as an underpaid teacher, because they exist in an area with a lot of rich people, they absorb the aristocratic temperament, and they know that the last thing you do with status or money is grasp at it. You obviously want money. Your life obviously runs on money instead as everyone's does. We are all material creatures. We all have to do this, right? But even if you don't have enough money, you never let on that money is your master. You never indicate through your actions or words that you either have money or that you need money in a really egregious way that is all under the surface. And that is because, and obviously this is something that my parents, they didn't get this by being aristocrats or by actually being Brahmins. They got this temperament by teaching them and by being in close proximity in the California Bay Area to the Brahmin class. But nevertheless, this ruling class disposition is essential. Because nobody wants to be ruled over by a grasping ruling class, constantly paranoid about maintaining his own status and money. As somebody, as an aristocrat, you are at all times representative of a broader community. If you grasp, the community looks petty. If you let on weakness, the community looks weak. I know a while back, the YouTuber, was it Justin Murphy, said that, and this was seriously LARPy, and I don't agree with this sentiment, but I do think it's an important thought experiment. He wondered if not internet personalities that wrote and blogged online wouldn't become a kind of quasi-aristocratic class themselves. I hate the idea and it's super cringy, but it is offer an interesting thought experiment. Could Vosh become an aristocrat? Could he become a representation of the aspirations of the good life that BreadTube wants to live? I mean, I guess he could transform himself, but he'd transform himself into the almost diametric opposite of Vosh. People give Sargon a lot of crap in our communities. They see him as a Johnny-come-lately. They see him as someone who's always behind the revelation that we had a year back. But he doesn't exhibit a grasping nature. I can tell you that. His sort of dismissive sense of humor, well, it's irritating to be on the wrong side of it sometimes when you're in conversation with him, does allow him to take his own prospects not very seriously. And after everything is said and done, he has improved his life. He has focused on himself. And, while in some sense, I don't think it's any great thing to aspire from somebody in my position, we're probably more or less at the same level. And in one regard, maybe one person's a little bit ahead on one thing, other person's a little ahead on the other. To the vast majority of his audience that might be NEETs, that might be chronically underemployed, that might have no control over their world, they are that could be aspirational, and really I don't see any equivalent that's going on in BreadTube. Always forwarded by people like the Amazing Atheist or Vosh or Demon Mama is just this extreme form of personality disorder. They get away with it because they're popular and rich. But could you imagine someone who's not popular and rich trying to do the same thing? It's depressing. The other two things, these are things that, again, the social media encourages it. I probably should have put this as one bullet point, but the problem is drama and posturing. Oh boy, drama. I took basically a 2-month break from social media. I've always been off Twitter and Facebook. But, when I got off Twitter and Facebook in December and January, I started things like Discord and Telegram and Entropy. And the idea was that these would be the replacement and that I'd be able to escape from a lot of the defects that I faced on the larger social media platforms. The promised land of the alternative media social network is that it's just the people you want to talk to. Everyone knows that your reach is going to be less on alternative media platforms, right? But you think that there's sort of an exchange going on, right? You think that, okay, well, sure, I'm not going to have 8,000 followers on Telegram, right? Like I did on Twitter. I'm not going to have people retweeting me every second of every day when I say something that's marginally clever, which really does horrible things to your ego and your general temperament, in addition to being sort of poisonous from an anger management point of view, which is really my problem with Twitter to begin with. But you assume, though, that the alternative media sites, they're going to lower your reach, but they're going to get you a higher quality of person. And that's just not true. After 2 months of not being curated, all of my alternative social media accounts were inundated with drama-generating trolls who were just there. They were just there to be the biggest crab in a bucket of crabs. They were there to be the king of the dung heap and to demonstrate that they were the strongest one of all the people who were too edgy to be on Twitter, Facebook, or, I don't know, TikTok. I never even used TikTok, so why did I mention that? But that was the thing. And it was pure drama, because everyone loves drama. Drama is chaos, and chaos means that you can climb the little social hierarchy of clout, right? And that's what chaos means. And it's just, I think I spent an hour looking at this, and this was Monday, and this certainly was a larger part of the talk I had planned on Monday. I just despaired. I'm like, what am I doing? This is all the worst elements of Twitter and Facebook coming back towards me. It's a perpetual list of problems that just can't be dealt with. An aristocrat can't deal with drama. He has to diffuse drama. And this is where it sort of got it into my mind to try to write out in essay form statements of the disagreements I have with various communities and how to get around them. And how to kind of try to dissolve them into either live and let live, irresolvable differences and war, or better yet, some kind of synthesis, some kind of unification, and a recognition that we both have two sides of the same ultimate truth. But even there, drama kind of gets me to the third point, and that is sort of the posturing. Again, I've said this, we lost. Okay, please. How can I put this more bluntly? How can I not be insulting? But is there anything less aristocratic than claiming power you obviously don't have? Everyone knows that the right wing isn't on the verge of launching some devastating populist movement. Everyone knows that we can't use social media clout to do anything. So why are you posturing on social media like we can? I guess to make yourself feel better, to assure yourself that you're not alone. Assuring yourself that you're not alone is actually a good thing, and maybe we'll get into that in my last slide. But man, can we do without the posturing? Don't tell me that a spade isn't a spade. Don't tell me that the shit sandwich we're all chewing on in 2021 isn't a shit sandwich, and there's some secret six-dimensional underwater backgammon we can play to get out of the situation. And we're almost there. No. This posturing, this drama, this grasping is all part of one common thing that in some sense, most right-wing social media behavior is part of, that is ultimately unaristocratic, and that is cope. That is coping. And again, since leftist YouTube and leftist Twitter has totally mangled the word cope, let me give you the definition of what I mean. Coping is not simply fighting for a lost cause. There are many noble and aristocratic ways of fighting for a lost cause. Fighting for a lost cause means accepting your fate, accepting with dignity, and understanding what that loss will mean, and accepting it with grace. That is not cope. Cope is taking a loss, denying that you took the loss, lying to yourself that you've taken it, and then engaging in some destructive behavior that is ancillary or impeding your ultimate goals. Because that destructive behavior makes you feel better and helps you perpetuate the illusion that you actually lost. That you were on not necessarily the wrong side of an issue, but the losing side of an issue. Cope, in my mind, is the generating... It is, in many cases, the ultimate source of the grasping, of the posturing, of the drama. People are doing this because they're in a mode of cope, and we need to get out of a mode of cope. So that being said, what do we need to do? And again, I am stealing some of this from other NRX figures. Everyone knows whose Substack I follow, so I can't help this. But an aristocrat, or anyone who aspires to be someone who wants to do something beyond chasing clout, beyond cope, needs to prioritize a certain amount of things in their online behavior. In the small spaces that we have, in the communications that we engage with, we have to have some things that are priorities over others. One, and I know this is something that Yarvin's talked about, we need to think in terms of survival and not victory. We're not going to get victory in any short term. It's just not in the cards. I don't know how to say this in any more definitive sense, and I know people can test me on this, but victory is not in the cards in the short term. The task before us is survival. And in some sense, survival is the ultimate strategic goal, at least when you conceptualize it in a spiritual or collective sense. Victories are only victories if they enhance our ability to carry forth our spiritual and civilizational tradition into the future. If victories don't help us do this, in any sense, they're not victories, they're cope. And in this, in focusing on survival, I think the problem becomes kind of easier in a lot of ways, right? Once you're not trying to get an ultimate victory, and once you realize, again, that your enemies aren't necessarily genocidal, they're just predators, you understand the battle in a whole different way. Again, I'm borrowing an analogy from Yarvin. But if you're a gazelle, you're not trying to beat the lion. You're just trying to survive the lion. Moreover, the lion isn't really trying to wipe out all gazelles. He's just trying to get a meal. If the lion was trying to commit some genocide against the species of gazelles, the lion would be most concerned with taking out the most aristocratic, the most fit, the best gene seed of the entire gazelle race, right? Because those would be the people that would ultimately carry on and make the gazelle better in subsequent generations. But the lion isn't doing that. The lion just wants to catch anything. And as such, by going higher, the gazelle can adapt. The gazelle can evolve. The gazelle can become better at escaping, and the lion is at hunting. You can adapt to a struggle for survival in more creative ways than you can adapt in a tactical struggle, in a tactical war for survival. And that needs to be a consideration. Second, and I think this is sort of both something we need to be seeking in our own communities and also in our relation to the cathedral or the mainstream, we need to seek humility without submission. Humility is a quality that's really unmistakable. It's a quality that's supremely lacking in our generation, probably even in myself. Probably nobody starts a YouTube channel who's particularly good at being humble, right? But humility without submission makes you a very, very difficult prey animal. And it makes you a very, very good community member, both for your own community and perhaps people who might be attracted to your community from the outside. This is a high wire act, in a sense, because humility is so close to submission. Submission is ultimate death of the spirit. You can't submit. You can't admit to the outside world that it's right morally about the disgusting future that they're trying to sell us. You can't admit that. You can't submit to it. But you can become less prominent. You can be honest about who you are. You can be honest about your smallness in the great picture, in the great scheme of things. And admitting that smallness instantly makes you harder to destroy. More and more, I think humility is an asset. More and more, I imagine that if BreadTube and LeftTube takes the dive that I think it is going to take in 2021, people might be hungry for a certain amount of humility in other communities, both online and off. Third, there needs to be a focus on results. This is sort of more of a business practice than necessarily something that is aristocratic in the sense that you might imagine it in terms of 17th century nobles going around like you see in this picture. I think this might be Charles I and his infamous wife Henrietta, but this is that picture you see behind you here. But I'll say this, with the exception of possibly only the family, communities exist for a reason. And that reason is not making you feel like you're a powerful individual. They exist to accomplish something. I want to purge my social media of all the bad actors, but before I can purge my social media, I have to figure out what I'm actually trying to do with said social media to begin with. Why am I on Telegram? Why am I on Skype? Why am I on Discord, now with my 5th account that's been banned again and again and again by this company? Why am I here? Why am I spending my time doing this? What are the results I'm expecting? It's obvious communities don't need a reason to exist in the left. Because they have a reason to exist on the left. Communities exist on the left to make you feel like you're winning and to make you feel like you're one of the smart people, and so that the masses can flatter their own egos, and so that democratic operators can seem like they're big shots and actually solving the problem when they sell their own bullshit back to each other. That's why leftist communities exist. They don't exist for results in the outside world. They don't exist for education. They don't exist for the elevation of the human race in any way. And that's why, generally, leftist institutions are so bad at delivering those results. There's a reason why Clown World and Piss Earth and the Great Reset are a reality in the way they are a reality in the year of our Lord 2021. And that is that leftist communities are not focused on exterior results. They're focused on interior and cathartic results. They're focused on self-flattery. We have to break this pattern. We have to sell a different product than the left. And it starts with breaking this pattern. It starts with saying every community we start online has to have deliverables. This community exists to educate. This community exists. Hey, if you're honest enough, you could even say that this community exists to entertain. Having a gaming community isn't bad. I think video games are fine in moderation. And I certainly would be a hypocrite for decrying board game addictions because I currently have them. But that being said, results have to be results towards human elevation. A gaming community has to be a healthy gaming community. A sports community has to be a sports community that does not get sucked into the many pathologies of becoming obsessed with celebrity and the ins and outs like a lot of professional sports communities did in the 80s and 90s. And this, I think, gets me to sort of the last point. The objective has to be human elevation, and the fruits of that objective have to, at some point, be visible. Now I know that I'm doxxed, I've been doxxed, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. But there's a reason why I decided to start doing these live streams with my face. And it's not because, I'm so great or anything, but I think that, it has to be at least apparent that I'm not afraid to show my face. It has to be apparent that I'm not ashamed at who I am, and that I can kind of stand on my own 2 feet and not shrink from what's before me. Oh man, well, speaking of which, I just realized that my picture is literally in front of the of my bullet points here. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, but I mean, if I'm going to be a community leader and I'm trying to promote human elevation, some part of me has to be front and center. Not to flatter my own ego, but to be honest about where I am and to sort of be accountable about moving forward and focusing the results on some type of elevation, either personal, collective, or spiritual. And I guess this is sort of the end of the talk. We can't win against the left. We have to play a different game. And the game that the left is not playing is the game of becoming an aristocratic force inside a medium that is by its very nature non-aristocratic. That's the task before us. I don't think it's easy. It does mean disconnecting from a lot of different types of technology that we think are pathological. Twitter, Facebook, in my own case, Windows, even though that resulted in the first 2 attempts at doing the stream completely crashing. But Linux might be a pain in the ass to use at some point, but I will say, the penguin kind of is evil, but it undeniably is an aristocratic type of existence. There is something good to saying that the software you use is open, that the software you use is ethically sourced, and that it belongs to a community and not a corporation dedicated to the destruction of you and your community. That's how an aristocrat would think. And so taking some hit in the short term isn't necessarily a bad thing in pursuing that ultimate end. And with that, I think I can finally close this. It's 10:30 now, and I think we can take till what? I don't know, what is it? Usually I take these things to midnight, so we'll have more or less an hour and a half to answer super chats, to interact with the chat. I can finally bring forward all of the doodads, including the art here. And we're now in chat mode. I will highlight the replies that I want to answer if they come through Entropy. That's the incentive of donating through Entropy, is that I will highlight your chats in Entropy. So how do I do this? I guess because, as you might know, there were a variety of super chats that came down the line in sort of the aborted fail streams, and I'm obligated to read them. And I'm not so sure what order I'm going to do this in. Okay, let's do the Entropy chats first. I know Last Things charted me, and I know he's trying to embarrass me. Last Things, I love your YouTube channel. Why do you force me to own up to my nerdy hobbies that I'm ashamed of? But let's begin with the Entropy chats, and then I'll get to the super chats going through Google last. I have a good excuse to do Aristocratic Owl first, because he put his super chat in the questions box of Entropy, therefore highlighting it to me. Aristocratic Owl, how do you think I could bring moral accountability to friends' claims it's bad to force morals on other people? Okay, how do you think I could bring moral accountability to friends and claim it's bad to force morals onto other people? That's the thing. It's not generally... I guess it's sort of insulting to force morality upon adults that obviously have their lives in order. I'd agree with that. The statements to the mainstream has to be one of independence, not one of tactical amorality. The libertarians and the liberals played this game all throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where they pretended that the point of our entire society was to be sort of a moral neutral ground. To the extent that in the 1990s, the late 1990s, I believe it was the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg who delivered the absolutely ridiculous line that every time she heard lawmakers talk about morality, her back stiffened and she knew she was dealing with a potentially unconstitutional law. What the F are you talking about, Justice Ginsburg? Morality is the entire subject of law itself. It's all normative. So, I mean, this is something like a Jordan Peterson quote. The moral accountability as a minority has to be lived. It can't be preached. Certainly, I don't think any parent could possibly think that moral accountability isn't a thing. Because most of the things you do with a young child who's older than 14 months is essentially correct them and try to make sure that they're living a better life than they obviously want to through their wills. I was chatting, and I know I brought this person up a few times in my various streams. I was chatting with a streamer called Demon Mama, and they seem to believe that not only politically should children and adults be at the same level, that it was immoral for the adult to impose their will upon the children. And you hear these things coming out of left field, and no parent is going to take that seriously. No parent is going to take that seriously. No one worthwhile who is even in a management position is going to take that seriously. The Democrats only preach this because they don't actually believe it, and they know that that's what the mob wants to hear. They know that's what their own trained SEALs want to hear. I think that the way to sort of refute this tactical libertarian or liberal nihilism is just to flat out deny it. Just say that's ridiculous. Everyone imposes their morals. Everyone gets managed. I think what you mean is you want more independence. What you want is autonomy. What you want is subsidiarity. You don't want amoral cultural you don't want an amoral culture, and you certainly don't want an amoral government. I don't know. I think this would be a lot easier to sell to our generation if more people had kids. I know I only have one, and that's probably like, people are going like, you don't even know what you're talking about, but it does change you. And I see millennial woes out there, and I'm like, man, I don't want to run your life woes or anything like this, but I just think like seeing a person like millennial woes, you just know that he would really come out of his shell if he had a kid. He would really like take the next necessary steps in his life if he was put in that position. You can just see how he would grow into the role of a dad if he were to take that step. It's a little bit voyeuristic to say that about another YouTuber, but I mean, I guess being I don't consider myself a trad cath. I'm just Catholic. As the YouTuber Robin Riley used to say, I'm not a traditionalist. I'm just not nuts. I'm not a trad cath. But as the person who's called trad cath online, I don't think recommending marriage and child rearing is really too far off the reservation for me. Okay, another one from Aristocratic Owl. I'm putting off the ones from last things for as long as I possibly can. What do you think of Jonathan Pageau's interview with Benedict? Okay, it's cut off a little bit in my screen. What do you think of Jonathan Pageau's interview with Benedict Sheehan on the leading edge of culture? Would you agree with Benedict on how to form culture? I haven't seen that one. I haven't seen that video. I do really much admire Jonathan Pageau as a thinker. He's a good guy. Everyone should watch him. This sounds really shallow. I just don't like the way he talks in podcasts. Is that reflects more on my weakness and my pettiness than does anything from Jonathan Pageau, who's a total stand-up guy. But whenever I see a podcast in his feed, it kind of gets short shrift. It kind of goes to the bottom of the line. So, yeah. Okay. All right, here it goes. We're going to dive into the other entropy chats. Okay. Okay. Last things for $3 USA. Orcs. What about the Black Templar, the most trad Warhammer 40k faction? I thought I had you pegged. You really let me down, bruh. So this is obviously bringing up my shame of playing a game of Warhammer 40k. This is the stupid. Everyone is allowed one stupid self-indulgent thing in 2020 that they could take as a write-off. No one had any free time, and my stupid thing I did in 2020 wasn't play video games. I didn't play any video games. I built a Warhammer army, and it was orcs. The reason is, whenever you get into a game where you have to pick a faction and stick with it, my philosophy, and I guess this is sort of life advice, but for all of you gamers out there, whenever you have to pick a faction for a game, and it's some deep game like Magic the Gathering or StarCraft or Warhammer, my philosophy is always pick the faction that everyone says they like to play against. The point of the game is to have fun. And everyone uniformly in the community of Warhammer 40k agrees that orcs are the funnest one to play against. The games don't go overly long, and they're just fun. Furthermore, if you're a hobbyist and you like using tools, my philosophy for hobby and craft of any kind is broken is better. The whole point of craftsmanship, the whole point of building something and making it look cool, is to take it from the worst possible state to the best possible state. So there's no better thing, there's no more fun thing than to buy a broken, decrepit model from the 1990s that looked like it was a dog toy, and then sand it and restore it to something that looks really, really cool and professional. That's the satisfaction of building something, is to take something that's cheap and broken and to turn it into something that's not broken anymore. So that those are the reasons. Okay, great. Now I get to answer the embarrassing question from last thing that's going to hit me from the other direction. Now, not calling me out so much as a nerd, but calling me out as a fake. Why isn't this selecting? I don't know. Okay, well, I have no idea why entropy is failing. Oh, it is not failing. There it is. Last thing says, what's the right number of children to have? Past 2, and I feel like you lose out on the intimacy and the connectedness with your kids by spreading yourself too thin. But to be truly trad, you need at least 8. And if you have less than 5, you're a cuck. Oh, damn, man. I'm only in my first one here. I mean, I plan to expand the family and all, but I don't know if I'm going to get to... I don't know if I'm going to get to the threshold of 5. But that being said, all seriousness, I don't see any evidence that... I don't see any evidence that having more children makes you love them less or focus on them less. If anything, from my own experience, larger families tend to be a better psychological environment for children. The phenomenon of the only child so prominently in my own millennial generation, I think might lead to a lot of the cases of borderline personality disorder that you see again and again among millennials. I'm not a professional psychologist. I don't know if this is a thing. But I can't help but wonder if there isn't a connection from what just my personal anecdotal life has been. I will say that from what I've seen, having 2 kids is significantly harder than having 1. That's understandable, right? Because with 1 kid, it's really easy because, there's always a down parent, right? So if you juggle things properly, it works out without a hitch, right? And if I'm at all honest, I probably lost, I certainly don't have as much free time as I did in 2018 2018 or the last months of 2018. But I have some free time to work on videos and other stuff, right, and hobbies. There's a little bit of that, and that's really all I need. And I like to think that I spend a long time with my kid. So, I used to think that the difficulty of getting additional kids sort of leveled off after the third one. A lot of the super have a lot of kid Catholics that I talk to in my old parish seem to be of the opinion that the difficulty kind of leveled out at 3 or 4 and it more or less plateaued from there on out. I'm not so sure if I believe that anymore. But I don't have any personal direct experience with that, so we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, next chat. Seas of golden flowing sand, or in hammer blow of the prophet's crown, slip like fire through clutching hands. For Canadian $5. Is that a poem of some type? Am I missing the context? It is a poem. It's by Henrik Ibsen. Henrik Ibsen. I can't say that I maybe I can find this exact quote. Flowing sand. I'd love to read this poem if you give me a moment to. Well, okay, maybe this is an incorrect Google hit. For a minute there, that seemed like you were quoting an Ibsen poem, but I don't find the exact quote in this person's collected poetry. Although those words seem to be very, very commonly appearing in this document. But thank you for those thoughts. I'm not so sure how to respond to it beyond then. It would be nice to read a poem, wouldn't it? I think I was going to read a Yeats poem originally, but I don't know. I think we'll just have to play it by ear with all these things. Okay. So, Catholic leisure ethic for Australian $5. Now that Patrick Casey has split with Nick Fuentes, would you consider going on his podcast? He has interesting critiques on NRX. I was never averse to going on Nick Fuentes' podcast. Quite personally, I didn't think he ever wanted to have me on. I'll go on anyone's podcast. I was on Keith Wood's channel dealing with the critiques of NRX, from his point of view. I mean, quite frankly, I'll talk to anyone about the critiques of NRX. It's so funny. I don't even really consider myself to be that much of an NRX guy. But because I made a popular video on Mensch's Molebug in 2019, just as he was coming back onto the scene, I will forever be known as the NRX guy. I really should be known as the Catholic social justice guy, but none of the videos I have that have tangentially talked about Catholic social justice have ever gotten really popular, so no one knows me as the Catholic social justice guy. They all know me as the NRX guy. But sure, I'll go on anyone's podcast with an invitation. My schedule is a little bit impacted. I don't typically have time during the day. I get really free around 8 p.m. Pacific time, which for most people is just like the dead of night in Eastern Europe, in Eastern United States and in Western Europe. So, I really am not in a good position to move my schedule around to meet other people's. So, I don't know, give me an invitation and we'll see what we can work out. Patrick Casey is a very activist type guy. He's really more in the how can we get people elected group, at least from what I saw of him in 2019. And, I don't want to put that down, but it's not what I'm interested in. Again, I don't want to revivify the activist versus pacifist conflict inside the dissident right. But, I don't really have any questions for Patrick Casey. I just, more or less, my desire is to keep our projects separated. Louis Macris, for $5. With you off Twitter, is there another place where you list all of your content? Interviews on other podcasts, YouTube channels, etc. Well, right now it's Telegram. I am not particularly happy with either my Telegram or Matrix or Discord community management. Something just really needs to change. I really need to just toss all of this out and completely restructure it. But I will say this. My wife had this solution for me, and I think it's the right one. I'm going to create a Twitter account, or she's going to create a Twitter account called Distributist Echoes or whatever. She's going to make a password that I don't know. And then we're just going to set up a little app out of if this then that will simply echo all my Telegram posts to Twitter. So that if you use Twitter or Facebook, it will echo back. And I'll never see any replies. I won't see that you quote tweeted me. I won't even see that I'm canceled on Twitter. I don't care. I'm not on Twitter anymore for replies or for DMs. For now, the best alternative that I've been able to come up with is Telegram. It's absolutely not perfect. I'm absolutely not satisfied with it. It's basically Discord Lite, and I just don't have time. Oh, I'm sorry, did I didn't select this, pardon me. I absolutely don't have time to manage an online community. I just don't. I don't want to use the little amount of free time I have to ban people off a platform for shit posting and for generally being a nuisance to other people in the community. Maybe someone else needs to do that, but it's just not a role that I want to do. It's not something I'm really good at either. It always took me a long time to manage this, and I don't want to be someone who's, always has Discord running in the background. So, I don't know. Oh, I see Franklin's in the chat. Oh, hey, did I see? I think I saw your last stream. I'm not so sure if I have. I'm really behind on my podcast, so it all just kind of runs together. Yeah, he and I both are on a diet. I lost a little bit of weight this last month. I lost the first 10 pounds. Always the easiest to get off is the first 10 pounds. Because this is the weight my body wants to be at, right? It's certainly not the best weight. This is certainly not my CrossFit weight. This is certainly not the weight I was at when I regularly could just knock out like 12 pull-ups, and I could do a P90X routine really, really easily. But it's a lot better than I was post the completion of my PhD, post the return to the workforce and child and all that. Much less sedentary, much better diet. The one device I have as far as my diet is concerned is kombucha. Okay, somebody tell me this. Is kombucha healthy? It's made out of vegetables. It's not particularly sweet. It essentially is a fermented tea of sorts. But on the other hand, it's a drink with calories. So is kombucha healthy or not? As far as I'm concerned, having my little kombucha at the end of the day is a nice little highlight. It's a nice little kick, and I really, really appreciate it. And I figure that if I cut back on the carbs, and I haven't yet cut back on the carbs, that's still, right now I've only cut out the really unhealthy stuff from my diet, and it's done wonders. It's amazing. Just cutting out all of the superfluous, juices and the superfluous little snacks, and making sure you get out for a walk every day, amazing. Easily cut off that little excess weight that I had on there. It's not going to be sufficient to get me down another 10 or 20 pounds, but it's a good start. And I think I can manage the other areas and still keep the kombucha. Anyway, so Bolero 393 for $5. Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for all the great work over the years. Going back through your archives has helped me re-examine my own views. Best to you and the family. Well, thank you, Bolero. Yeah, just thank you. That's all I have to say about that. Okay, so Nerve AMV Maker for $10. Why does Keith Woods insist that capitalists are the ones steering society, despite James Burnham and others showing that the new elite, a new, I'll add this word, managerial elite has risen? Global warming doesn't gain standing to the oil tycoons who run the world. Well, I both agree with you, Nerve AMV Maker, and I disagree. The capitalists like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg do have an enormous amount of political influence in our present world. Sure, it's overstated, and sure, their existence as capitalists, qua capitalists, isn't as influential as a lot of people like all of LeftTube and Keith Woods make out. My frustration with the whole capitalist thing is just the thought-terminating cliche that is capitalism to begin with. As you rightly point out, Nerve AMV Maker, most capitalists who don't work in prominent information management industries like oil or shale or steel or paper pushing, these people don't have a lot of influence and are not driving our world politically in any way, shape, or form. So that's very, very clear. So when you refer to all these people as capitalists, and you refer to the system that we're laboring under as capitalism, you're missing that specificity. Furthermore, and I announced this frustration in my last one, it seems that every time we use capitalism as a catch-all word for the problems we are experiencing in globalized modernity, inevitably what happens is that capitalism, a system that by everyone's admission began in the 17th and 18th century, is used as a proxy for forces that I know existed before that time period and for phenomena that have only existed in the last 2 decades. I'm not saying that capitalism hasn't exacerbated our problems, but if the problem existed for 1,000 years before the 18th century, or if the problem has only started existing since the 1990s, capitalism cannot be the main force behind that phenomenon. There has to be another component in the room. And even in Keith Woods, he wasn't as naive as to suggest, like everyone in BreadTube does, that all of hierarchy and human organization, that people suffer under or complain at as leftists as a result of capitalism. But he was guilty of this when he was talking about the problem of property rights, and when he was talking about, when he was talking about the high-low versus middle political dynamic that seems to characterize our present political order. Dude, the high-low versus middle political dynamic is literally something that was a real reality in the lives of both two Florentinians, two Tuscans, I think is what you would call them, Machiavelli and Dante Alighieri. They both allude to this. So, don't give me that this is capitalism. This existed before capitalism. I don't know. I just don't think capitalism is a productive way of talking about even sort of the corporate problems in our present world. So, I don't know. I agree with you, Nerve AMV Maker, in broad strokes. Okay, already answered that one. Okay, spam account for $5. Fellow Californian here. Did you just get the earthquake notification? I just moved here and I'm scared, lol. Well, I guess we might have gotten an earthquake notification. I feel like we get those so often it's going to tune them out, right? Most earthquakes you get here in California rarely even register in anywhere except a few places along the San Andreas Fault. I really wouldn't worry about it if you've just moved here. Don't be driving over a bridge. Make sure you've earthquake-proofed things in your house. And I don't know. The only earthquake that I could really remember, and this is barely at the edge of my living memory, was the 1989 earthquake that happened during the World Series between the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. And this was an earthquake that you could really feel. It was a much larger one. It wasn't like these little pissant ones that, like, oh, you get dizzy for a second and like, oh, it's an earthquake, right? This was like a literal, the ground underneath your feet is quaking. And I remember the pools outside just sloshing over all of their water. I don't know. I wouldn't make much of it, but thank you, fellow Californian. Dallas CNMK for $2. Dallas metropolitan area, 9 million population, taking all of the California jobs fast. Well, sure. I guess it's taking a lot of the jobs, but none of the industries I work in are really there. And I mean, I don't know. If you wanted to be in a thought epicenter inside Texas, I don't think you move to Dallas or really anywhere in East Texas. And I'm not trying to put down East Texas here, but everyone knows that the thought epicenter in Texas is Austin. But if you move to Austin, you still have to deal with the same shit libs and progressive secret police that you have to deal with in some place like Berkeley, California. Our problems, whatever they are rapidly globalizing. And I'm not so sure that move to a red state is the panacea that everyone makes it out to be. I think that any solution we have for a reasonable, non-progressive lifestyle is going to have to be something that we invent both in the San Francisco Bay Area and also in the hinterlands of America, Canada, and Australia. I really do think that we have to start thinking internationally. And I don't mean that in the idiotic way that everyone in Berkeley was saying, oh, you need to think globally and act locally. And no, I just mean that we need to make sure that our ideology rings true regardless of where you live on the globe. Because people move around a lot these days. This is my favorite super chat of all time from Richard RNWD. Stop accepting super chats. Well, yeah, that would be. I don't know. I might be doubling back on myself, but I'm not quite ready to get off the super chat teat quite yet. Maybe, and this might be a compromise. Maybe I will totally shut down my super chat functionality in my YouTube. And if you really want to give me a donation, you can go through Entropy. That may be a compromise. I won't completely demonetize my channel. But at the same time, I will exert a certain level of aristocratic discretion and give my business only to a service that isn't actively trying to destroy my online career and ruin my life in any uncountable number of ways. So, thank you very much, Richard MWD. I will very much consider ending the super chat service, but not on this stream. And in the meantime, let me collect all your filthy shekels for my shekel pouch. My 5% nature is coming to the fore once more. Did I do no? Okay, don't cancel my YouTube. James Reich for $25. Any thoughts on mechanics, themes, and aesthetics for Christian video games? Horror mechanics seem promising, but beyond that, I'm at a loss. Well, this is something I probably would have thought at when I played video games a lot more. I mean, I'm not a person that plays video games, but I do play board games. And one thing, this isn't really a Christian aesthetic, but it is an aesthetic that I have appreciated in all board games that I have played. And that's the understanding of asymmetry. I like games that aren't fair. I like games where you get a roll and you just have to deal with it. My favorite 52 card game was Struggle for the Classes, which if you're an old Richard Garfield game player, you'll recognize also as the great Del Moody. He basically remarketed this classic 52 deck card game as its own little, thematic set based on the medieval caste system. But Struggle for the Classes is a game where players in a trick-taking game literally have to play out different roles. And the point of the game is not to necessarily do the best, but to do the best in the role where you are assigned. This is just a game mechanic that has been criminally underexplored inside, well, I can't say for modern video games, but I can certainly say in modern board games, everything has to be fair. Another Richard Garfield game, and people know this is another board game that's one of my all-time favorites, Netrunner, right? Netrunner is a dueling game that features a corporation, an infinitely powerful and rich entity, and a Netrunner, a small little pissant that's trying to disrupt the big guy, right? And you have to essentially compete against each other on an unequal playing field. And of course, the runner has conditions for victory that give him some advantages in this contest. But nothing about the economic game as the corporation plays it is the same as the way the runner plays it. And there's something deeply Christian about playing a competitive game where you're trying to figure out the best way, the best things you can do in your own situation, maybe even the most beautiful way of playing the game that's in front of you. I get a lot of shit about being interested in what I call deep board games. Deep board games are like Magic the Gathering and Netrunner and Warhammer. These are games that have what are called metas in them, right? So the game isn't just the game that you play, but also there's a certain amount of prep work that you have to do in order to build your sort of game thing, like, a collection of cards or, maybe an army or something like that. And so what you do, there is some environment that you play the game in. But one thing I've always appreciated about metagames is that in metagames, unlike something like poker or blackjack or the Great Deal Moody or even Pandemic, you don't always have to play to win. As a matter of fact, in a lot of circumstances, you're encouraged not to play to win. You're encouraged in order to play in a certain kind of style. I should really highlight these things. Okay, there we go. And that is something that I really want. That's something just as a game player I would really appreciate to be more of a thing. I really would want that. Sorry, guys, if I'm kind of lurching towards myself. Again, it's the same stupid horsefly that's constantly landing on my legs. Maybe if you see me doing this, I don't know. It's just really irritating. We got to get the pest situation under control here. Okay. Well, here is a super chat that I can definitely get behind before I go on, James Reich. I really do appreciate the super chat. I probably could give you more things to talk about. That could be Christian themes inside of video games. Okay. Thank you. Just got past the fly swatter here, so maybe next time I can end this reign of harassment. Just hold it down here and hope that it electrocutes itself or something like that. The only thing I can think of the thing is, all games are about winning, right? So the natural subjects of games are either war or economic systems. And I think in the last 30 years, as far as board games are concerned, we really mined out a lot of the possibility for war in economic games. I think that the future will probably belong to games that have radically different objectives or that are radically asymmetrical in their setup. That's what I'd like to see. And there's something that's a little bit Christian about that, right? I mean, the Christian Gothic worldview is one in which the alignment between the forces of good and evil are in many ways radically asymmetrical. So I think that you could make something of that, right? Okay, so Aline Bordelon for $10, thank you very much. The right needs to take advantage of this dark time to grow in virtue. 100%. 100%. But this is the beginning of a conversation. The critical question is how. In this lecture, I went over the takeaway from this lecture is don't do what BreadTube does. And in fact, figure out what is missing from BreadTube and try to incorporate that into a new, either into a new content project or into a new way of interfacing with the online world. If you see that BreadTube is getting sucked into 8-hour live streams, make sure that you don't do 8-hour live streams. Make sure that whenever you get on a live stream, you have something that you need to talk about, you have something that you need to say, and you're not here to just be the continuous facilitator of a parasocial relationship. If BreadTube is all about drama and backbiting, don't do drama. If BreadTube is continuously concerned about who's racist, who's the good person, who's the bad person, try to discard virtue signaling of any variety. You know, that at this point, I'm pretty sure that if BreadTube is doing it, it's probably a good indication that you shouldn't be doing it. Is that the most I can do? I probably could. Again, this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. But insofar as we can get this question of becoming more virtuous and becoming worthy into a context that is both understandable and actionable for people who I'm interacting with online, that's the best I can do right now. Don't do what BreadTube does. Don't do what the left does. Also, I mean, this is going to be another conversation. I probably should make this an essay of some sort, but try to kill your inner bugman. Learn what the bugman is, and then kill it inside of yourself. Again, I'm not saying you can't play video games. I'm not saying you can't have one or two nerd hobbies. Lord knows I do. But that's got to become a secondary feature in your own life. It has to be something that's much, much less prominent, and those things like identity and heritage and family have to become more prominent. You have to leave the bugman behind. CNMK for $5. The left equals... This fly seems to be completely evading my attempts to kill it. I'll just try to ignore it. It's not aristocratic to concern yourself with the going on of the flies. That's a great one, actually. I brought this up. There is a Latin phrase that expresses the sentiment of never do drama. Aquila non capit muscas. Yeah, I got this from Grain Mirror. So sue me. The eagle does not capture flies. The noble do not concern themselves with the goings-on of the trivial. And for the duration of this live stream, I'll just ignore this stupid horsefly that keeps on landing on my foot. The show must go on. Okay. CNMK for $5. The left equals scientific materialism equals reject ancestors from whom you inherit identity, rootlessness. The left cuts off self from life. Read Carl Jung's Alien. Do you read Jung? Carl Jung? No, I have never read Carl Jung. I have never read Carl Jung.
Young.
Is it Jung?
Yeah.
It's not Jung?
I think it's Young.
It's not spelled like Jung. Okay, well, I'll say Jung. Yeah. I was tempted to read Carl Jung in 2016, and then Jordan Peterson became a big deal, and I think I probably listened to Jordan Peterson talk so much about Carl Jung that I just don't know that I can possibly bring myself to make time to read this author. at least until YouTube stopped automatically appending Jordan Peterson's lectures at the end of every single video I ever click on. It's just got to get beyond that. But I really appreciate what you're saying. It's absolutely right. The left, well, I mean, this is obviously what's so strange about the left, because in some sense the left is materialist. But in the same sense, it's also strangely disembodied. It exhibits this psychological quality that an author I deeply admire, deeply admired, but now I am blanking on the name. Walker Percy. So Walker Percy correctly identified this quality of leftists as angelism. This is, and I don't know if he's using this word in the absolute correct psychological sense, but in his book Love in the Ruins, I think it's called Love in the Ruins, which is probably one of the most prophetic books ever made, right? Love in the Ruins, is it called that? Yeah, Love in the Ruins. Okay, I want to make sure I didn't get the title wrong. Love in the Ruins is one of the most prophetic books of all time. It basically describes a culture war that keeps on accelerating after the 1960s rather than resolving it for a time in the 80s and 90s. And it essentially describes a 2012 that comes in 1972 rather than a generation after 1972. And Walker Percy describes the psychological affliction of the leftists as angelism, the tendency to materialize the world, but simultaneously consider yourself as disembodied from it. The leftist somehow sees his own interaction with the world as if he's interacting with a video game character. And in this sense, it just seems that video games, at least in their present incarnation, just so embody the kind of detached nature that you see in modern leftists. The kind of bugman personality where you're not so much a person who exists in a physical body with a certain kind of heritage, with a certain kind of nature and land and homeland around you. You are sort of a disembodied shell, a participator in experience that can be modified and reconfigured for whatever your consumeristic demand is. Again, I'm not so sure if Percy is correct in identifying this with the term angelism, but that's the one at least that sticks to my mind. Already answered that one. One of the things that I've been working on is leading a book group in Discord. That's a great idea. I would love to, well, I'm not in a position in my life right now. I have led many a book group in my life, and I love doing it. I love reading book groups. If you read anything like Dante's The Divine Comedy, like Aristotle, or any of the Greek classics, please read them in a book group. I'm telling you, there's no other way to read them. I will talk about this more in other videos, perhaps if I move. A month ago, I was more convinced I'd be in the process of moving. Now it's more up in the air. But if I do move, I will do that stream where I pack up all my books. And I will talk about the infamous volume of the collected works of Aristotle and the infamous volume of the collected works of Plato. Every pseudo-intellectual or aspiring intellectual inevitably buys one of these volumes, right? It's so common that even C.S. Lewis in 1963, in his little novella, The Great Divorce, literally points out this feature. Most people buy these volumes of collected works and they do nothing with them. They read the first little treatise, that's how you pronounce it. They read the first little treatise or dialogue that Plato or Aristotle have. They're uninterested, they miss the point, and then they put the book on the shelf, and it never gets read again. I don't think that this is the right way to do it. Book groups are the right way to do it. read dialogues in a book group, because inevitably, when you read it in a book group, somebody is reading it for the second time. Somebody is reading the right dialogue or the right little section of Aristotle or Plato. They'll have an emotional resonance with it. And immediately, someone will be able to understand an element of context, necessary context that you missed. I was lucky enough in my college years studying engineering to join an amazing book group where we got through pretty much half of Aristotle and half of Plato over the course of 3 years, discussing each of the dialogues in a group. There is no other way to do it. I did not have the intellectual chops to realize the genius of Plato or Aristotle when I was that age. But because there were other people who were more sophisticated, I could read those texts and not to see them as dusty meanderings of a culture that existed thousands of years in the rearview mirror. Book groups are great. Discord, though, I'm not there. And not just because I think it doesn't work so well and it encourages people being snitches. It's because I've been banned off of it like 4 times. Okay, another Australian for $5. I just rewatched your Edwardian archetype with video a number of times and shared it with friends who also loved it, despite it also being depressing. Can you recommend any nonfiction books that you used? Any good books on the impact of World War I on the Edwardian mindset? Good Lord, where do you start on this? Well, I mean, there's an entire generation of fiction authors in the circle of Virginia Woolf and T.S. Eliot who really did nothing but comment on the impact of World War I on the Edwardian mindset. That's the implicit background of any Virginia Woolf novel or early T.S. Eliot or any people in that circle. I'm drawing a blank on a nonfiction book that embodies this. I'm sure I'll think of one as soon as I turn the stream off. The one that comes to mind that I talked about a little bit last stream is Peter Hitchens' The Rage Against God, when he talks about the decline in religiosity hitting exactly at the end of World War I, because everyone had been so thoroughly betrayed by their own society. I don't know that Peter Hitchens. I know people don't like him in our circles, but I do really like. I do really like his writing style. It's so direct, and I don't like everything he's ever written. Some of it seems a little bit petty. Actually, a lot of it seems very petty. But in The Rage Against God, he just lays out the pettiness of new atheism in such stark and direct terms that it still, to this day, really resonates with me. As a matter of fact, you might have noticed that for my first slide on the talk today, I used Thomas Hart Benson's Return of the Prodigal Son, which in the very same book, Peter Hitchens uses as an example of how it felt coming back to the Anglican Church after being an atheist for years and years and years. Thomas Hart Benton's The Prodigal Son is a variation on the parable of Jesus, where once coming back to the farm, the prodigal son does not find a welcoming father, but a pharmacist that has been smashed, more or less due to his own absence. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm working on the next entry in that Trad Codex video series. That's all I can say. The way I made those videos between late 2018 and before the baby came, my lifestyle is just not in that mode anymore. Those videos took a lot of writing and a lot of close scripting and a lot of sort of consolidated blocks of time to efficiently produce. And in my present state, I don't have those consolidated blocks of time. So inevitably what happens is I get an idea. I write and record half of it. And then the other half is just these notes. and the notes sit around for months and months and months. And so the time I revisit it, I have 6,000 other ideas, and the notes don't even make sense in my own brain anymore. So I will really, really try to come back to making those videos. Please be forgiving with me, because those kind of videos are a lot harder for me to make. Zero Kev for $5 US. Should neo-reactionaries be happy with the rise of China? Can the cathedral infect the PRC? I know a lot of people who are creeped out by Spandrel's pro-China leanings, but it really seems like China could be an option for exit. Well, to put it in short, the cathedral can be infected. Any institution can be infected. Any institution is capable of entropy and degeneracy. That being said, this is a very fine line that the reactionary has to walk. It is absolutely true that the PRC and Xi Jinping's more competent approach to technocracy is absolutely an opportunity for reactionaries to show up the cathedral's own blinding incompetence. That is absolutely true, and that cannot be ignored. At the same time, it is absolutely unseemly for any type of aristocratic personality, and this is where things get kind of thorny, it is unseemly for them to take too much interest or to show too much preference for a foreign leader. The extent of what we can say is that Xi Jinping is not making a lot of the same mistakes that our current batch of rulers are, and we really have a lot to learn from him. And he's really avoided a lot of the foolishness and a lot of the foolish and silly ideas that our leaders seem dedicated to. And here you can insert your pet issue, transgenderism, incompetent reaction to the COVID-19 virus, fomenting race war in order to overcome your local political enemies. The list goes on and on and on and on. But as always, it has to be framed the exact right way. Isn't it interesting that Xi Jinping and the PRC are doing X? Isn't it odd that even though they're foreign, they're doing this so much better than us? It is absolutely good that we point out the ways they are doing things better, but we cannot, and I emphasize this enough, if we demonstrate that we are somehow more loyal to a foreign entity, I think we will betray a fundamental element of aristocratic nature that we should be aspiring to. And that is a loyalty to the subsidiarity and to the locality that we represent. What China does is interesting. What China does, we might learn from. What China does might expose the incompetence of our own leaders. But China is never definitively better because China is not us. And China will never be us. It's not even Christian. So I don't know. For my money, reactionaries have to try to walk that bright line, and they have to walk it very, very carefully. Always approach it in a sort of standoffish mode if you possibly can. Benedict the 17th. Oh, hey man, how's it going? Benedict the 17th, an amazing YouTuber. Oh, and in case I didn't mention this again, I know Last Things was trying to embarrass me, both with his Warhammer question and with his family planning question, secretly implying that I might be doing too much of the former and not enough of the latter. But Last Things has an absolutely great beginning YouTube channel, and Benedict the 17th has an absolutely great YouTube channel as well. Everyone should subscribe to it. It's been a while since I've seen one of his videos. I might have just missed it on my feed, so I apologize if I have. But it's been a long time since I've seen one of his videos, but I usually make a point of watching them. Benedict the 17th says for $25, not sure what network is the best to get your attention, but check out the 21-30 minute mark on the latest odds and ends video. IRL network building, IRL network building, and collab stuff. Well, there you go. I must have literally missed this video from Benedict the 17th. So thank you for pointing that out to me, Benedict. I certainly will go watch that. And, well, I guess it's too late to make it into my essay on this topic, but maybe the next one. FPS Silver for $2. Found you from your debate on Demon Mama. Thanks, King. Wait, hold on. Are we recording this? Did my stream go down? Like this? Oh, I'm sorry. First of all, I didn't properly select the Benedict. Okay. Wow. Okay. Sorry guys, 1 minute. But that is an amazing super chat. I actually went on a BreadTube streamer and somebody now knows me from there. That I didn't even think that was possible. I wonder why we're stuck on this. Why are we stuck on that highlight? Oh, I'm sorry. So I guess it doesn't highlight chats that are coming in from YouTube? Is that how it works? Okay. Well, okay, but that this goes to show, I suppose, that it's always worth it to reach out to the left, as irritating as they are. There's one thing that I want to make clear. I mean, there's a reason why I watch BreadTube, and it's not because they make good content. It's because they represent where our society is now. They represent where the youth are right now, and we have to come to terms with that at some level. You know, I mean, Demon Mama. I mean, we're talking really bottom of the barrel here, right? I mean, there's Destiny, which in 2017 people thought was the most dishonest actor when it came to debates. It seemed like he was a total mercenary. But then you go like 3 rungs down, you know, drop 20 IQ points and lose almost all of your class, and you get to Vosh, right? Vosh is like the more brain-dead, more ideological version of Destiny, and he even copies a lot of Destiny's phraseology. Okay, then you go from Vosh, drop 300 levels down, past Xanderhall, past Pig Puncher, 300 more pounds of shit, and then you get to the bottom of the barrel, which is Demon Mama. No self-awareness, absolute borderline personality disorder, cathartically working out what is transparently a life cope live on stream, and yet an up-and-coming voice on BreadTube. A place where all the cool kids are watching, right? Okay. Okay. Best of Ballers for $5. BreadTube tells the you that's gender is a social construct according to academia. What's your response? Well, hey, yeah. I mean, okay, 2 responses I always bring up. Gender is a social construct. First response, just a clarification. Is anything not a social construct? Answer most leftists give, no. Okay, fine. Gender is a social construct just like every other concept that has ever existed ever. Response 2, gender is a social construct. Yep, you're damn right it's a social construct, and I'll do you one better. Gender is a total figment of our imagination. It is a totally vacuous word, and I don't even feel like we should be discussing it. It shouldn't even be part of our conversation. Oh wait, explain to me again that even though you think gender is totally vacuous, why does this totally vacuous construction completely define the identity you fall into? Completely vacuous words, aka words that have no solid definition other than they are the things that mean the thing. So, for instance, and this is not all of the left wing, but it is most of them, and it is Demon Mama. To Demon Mama, the word gender simply means identifies as a gender. The word simply means itself. Vacuous words are the currency of charlatans. Vacuous words are the currency of charlatans. That's an eternal reality, and I really challenge any BreadTuber to tell me that that's wrong. Okay, we are coming up on time a little bit. I'm going to try to keep this going. Guys, I am going to have to stop taking super chats. I will try to get through all of the ones as they come up. Blue 99i for CRC, $2,500. I have no 2,500 units. I have no idea how much that is. You mentioned in your talk with Keith that Dostoevsky was a sort of trad aesthetic. Could you elaborate this point? Thanks. Well, I mean, is it a fact that Dostoevsky, at least if you compare him to his contemporaries like Tolstoy, Dostoevsky was an absolute reactionary. He had a deep skepticism towards revolutionary people, and this is very visible in something like The Demons. You know, you can see it very explicitly. You can see it explicitly and in a much less PC form if you read some of his expository writings, shall we say. But it's clear that just as a reality, Dostoevsky was a more right-wing figure than his contemporary writers. But when I say that Dostoevsky has a trad aesthetic, what I say is that what's communicated in most of his novels is the deep humanity and morality in the instincts that we experience day to day. There is a solidness in Dostoevsky that is not washed out by modernity. And I think even people like Nietzsche were very, very quick to realize this in a talent like Dostoevsky. Nietzsche said that Dostoevsky was one of the only living artists that really had something profound to teach him that he wasn't already aware of. And I think what he meant by that is that there is something solid here that is going to outlast the corrosive crisis that is modernity. And it wasn't just Nietzsche who pointed this out. Oswald Spengler, also said, and I don't think this prediction was particularly good, but he said that upon the fall of Western civilization will likely be a Russian civilization built on the spirituality contained within the works of Dostoevsky. Yeah, there's something deeply aesthetically reactionary in his works and in his political perspectives. What I always go back to is the ending of Brothers Karamazov, where what initially is an intellectual debate evolves into a criminal trial, and then in the last few chapters seems to divert back to being a story about personal spiritual enlightenment. And for some reason, even though you've taken a step back from sort of the grand narrative that's being talked about in this criminal trial, it seems like the last few chapters are more profound than any of the ones that have come before it. And to me, that seems like a very, very spiritual and a very, very right-wing revelation. All right. Gibberish for $5 says, recommended reading list or riot? You mean you want me to give you a recommended reading list? Yeah, I mean, I have that video coming up where I'll pack up my books and I'll talk about them. I'm never going to come up with my top 20 books, guys. It's just not going to happen for the simple reason that I don't believe there is a single person that needs the same set of books at the same time. A book is like a song or maybe even a pill of medicine. It's really very situational. For some people, C.S. Lewis is just the right person they need to hear. For other people, he's irritatingly cloy and theologically insulting. You give mere Christianity to a committed atheist or to a Christian knee-deep in systematic theology, they're not going to receive that very well at all. maybe the systematic theologian will see it as instructive, but ultimately naive. And the hardcore atheist is going to see it as kind of like, pseudo-intellectual trash. I will answer any chat as I get to it. I see a question from the chat about what I'm answering. But if I have a ream of super chats and only a half an hour more of stream time, I've got to prioritize the super chats. That's just a reality. Maybe I should actually disable super chats on Google and completely cash out. That might be a good thing to do. Pressure people to come over to Entropy. E. Solbergs for Knock 200. Hey, I saw your recent post on Telegram about classical music. Thoughts on channels in our sphere? Like the Godwin podcast or Apostolic Majesty that discuss topics like history and the classical canon from our perspective? Well, Jonathan, not to copy a previous super chatter, but Jonathan Pajau does a pretty good job of reviewing old books and old movies. Like I said, the canon is the canon, right? And it's good to have there. And if you want to get a list of what the Western canon is, there are several versions of the Western canon that you can use as a reading list, right? But I just don't think that an educator, and I do see myself predominantly as an educator, I don't think it's responsible for me just to dump like a 20-page list of books on somebody without guidance. Like, I need to know more about what people want. So I think the best thing I can do right now is just go over the books I have on my bookshelf and tell you why you might want to read them or what state of your life you might want to be in if you wanted to read it. Stephen Roberts for $10. Thoughts on Argentina as a bug out while the Western hegemony collapses? Well, that's an interesting thought. I know nothing about Argentina. I had some friends there for a while back. Their steakhouses are really good. They were kind of based in the 70s because of all of the refugees from the Axis towers that they took on. I don't know. Have they gotten their currency issues sorted out? I'm going to have to plead the fifth on that one, Stephen. I don't know if I can get you a good answer. I think it would be good to have a bug out plan, but I think it's got to be a bug out plan rather than trying to rank order countries at the level of their own baseness. I'm really not there. Ooh, here's a good example. Aristocratic Owl for $3. Would you consider interviewing my friend Outreamer for your channel? Sure, yeah, I would. What is his particularly skill set? Is he a homesteader or something? I know Franklin has done some really good interviews of lay people on his channel. I've thoroughly enjoyed them. But I have never once on my channel just out and out interviewed lay people. Almost all of the people I've interviewed on my channel have been content creators of one sort or another, with the possible exception of Michael Woodley, who actually now I might consider a content creator since he regularly is featured on Edward Dutton's podcast. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's certainly a possibility. I always think I would love to have two channels, where I could part my more experimental content. In some sense, I already do, because I have my wife's channel, and if something really doesn't do well on my channel, sometimes I private it and throw it over to hers. Sam153 for $15 American. Dave, have you listened to the American Mind podcast? They have great discussions related to topics that distance NRX people would appreciate. Thoughts on the movement of people from blue states to red states? I have not listened to the American Mind podcast yet. It's on my list. Maybe I'll listen to it. Tomorrow I have a chore I think I need to take care of. And whenever I do an outside chore where I need to rake something up, that's always a good time to have a podcast on in the background. And in some sense, it's always so bad because in some sense, playing with my son outside, I'm immediately confronted. Every time I've gone outside to do a chore in the last 3 years, I've always had a podcast on. Except now, when I take my son to the park, and he plays on the jungle gyms or sticks or whatever, I don't have a podcast on, and I'm noticing so much more about my environment when I do that. And so I'm serious. I'm not saying I'm going to give up podcasts, just like I'm probably not going to give up board gaming, right? I mean, I don't see a reason to. It's nice to have one outlet of your life that isn't either engineering or politics, or chores, obviously, right? But this time, it really has highlighted in my mind just how much focus I've been losing by constantly having content going on in the background, even when I'm doing something where my listening to content isn't damaging my performance of that task. But I'll go and answer. I really answer your second question. The movement of peoples from blue states to red states is a complete double-edged sword. It does not solve our long-term problems. It's effectively making red states more blue. And this is really why the objective of any kind of distant movement has to be to exist, or to be able to exist in some tolerable form across the board. We cannot be hothouse flowers that can only exist in red communities. Hey, if you want to live in a red community, Godspeed. And I think developing pure red cities is going to be something that we will see develop as our current cultural moment comes to a head. That being said, I don't think we necessarily can count on red states. And if we count on red states, we have to come to terms with the reality where at many points in a young person's life in particular, that person will have to exist within a community of people who are not distant. There are ways of raising children. There are ways of forming your internal community where that might not even be an issue. But really, it is the development of a plan to survive across the board that to me is really interesting. The retreat is good. It might be necessary. It might be the only way to process these things. But in my mind, it can't be the only solution. And when we're really serious, it is more or less a stopgap. You can't eternally flee into the hinterlands, right? That's not an option. And as I say this, I have to give a digression here. I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, but I've noticed that a lot of the people who at one point were just like, go to the red states, go to the red states, go to the red states, a lot of them are walking that back a little bit. Not that it isn't a bad idea, but I think that they're aware that this can't be the only part of our plan. This can't be the only element of survival. What we are living through is a time of diversity. And I'm sorry, you absolutely need to make some bets, but you also have to hedge. And I'm not trying to pick on this person, but I was listening to Millennial Woe's last podcast, and there was a point in the podcast where my wife jumped up and ran into the room where I was listening to the podcast and putting books away or something, and asked what was wrong, because I was literally shouting at the top of my lungs, no! And that was when Millennial Woes gave advice on cryptocurrency. And he used the words like, just do it, Just start investing in crypto. What are you waiting for? Okay, kids, I got a demur here. Whenever anybody tells you to make an investment with the words, just do it, get on the bandwagon, what are you waiting for? Your alarm bells better go on like this. Because never jump on a bandwagon. But by the time any investment becomes a bandwagon, it no longer is something that you can reasonably expect to pay out. There are 4 ways that you can make money on an investment. Number 1, you can be first. You can be the person who provides information to the system, and therefore you create value, and you're making money off your value by having the insight to be the first investor. Are you the first investor in crypto? No, right? That ship has sailed, right? The second way you can make money on investments, well, it's 2, but they're really the same, and that is time and money. You can have lower time preference, or you can have more liquidity, right? You could be like, I don't really care about having money now, so I'll put it in an investment, and the people who need to have the money right now will pay me for the privilege of getting the money now, because money now is always worth more than money later, and that's the value I'm providing. The other one is liquidity. I have more liquidity. I just have tons of money laying around, right? I'm not going to put it in the bank because interest rates suck right now, so I'm going to put it in the investment, and then, because investments are at least a little bit of risky, I can essentially pick up a profit on aggregate, right? Because I have more liquidity, and I'm helping the market escape from a liquidity trap. I'm providing value. Information, time preference, liquidity. The 3 legitimate ways of making money on investments. And you realize I said 4 ways of making money on investments, because the 4th one is kind of the dishonest way for making money on investments. And that one is straight up gambling. That is straight up being lucky. But if we're honest, gambling isn't always being lucky. Gambling is not being the sucker. And you know what you say about gambling. Whenever you sit down at a gambling situation, whenever you sit down at a blackjack table, you gotta know who the sucker is. Because if you don't know who the sucker is probably you. And if you're in a situation where you're asked to participate in an investment and someone's saying to get on the bandwagon or just do it, you should seriously think about not doing it. Because it's obvious that you don't have the time, you don't have the money, and you don't have any unique information. And if you're joining a bandwagon, you're sure as hell not one of the people who isn't the sucker. Cryptocurrency is good, but for the love of goodness, please understand why you're investing in crypto. Why are you investing in crypto? I can tell you why you're not investing in crypto. You're not investing in crypto because crypto is some kind of magic box that doubles in value every 5 years. I know a lot of the crypto YouTubers are implying that it is some kind of magic box that simply doubles in value every 5 years, because most cryptocurrencies have an artificially restricted supply. What's the problem with this? Well, it doesn't matter if you have an artificially restricted supply if you don't have any understanding of how the demand is going to behave in the long term. And we have no guarantee of how the demand is going to behave for cryptocurrencies. I can already see, and I know this is a digression, but I just have to say this to people because I'm really concerned about people being overexposed in the crypto market, especially on the distant right. You can already see governments gearing up for some serious banning of cryptocurrency. And crypto is not immune to banning. There have already been several articles pointing out how cryptocurrency is devastating to the environment. And as we know, this is sort of the MO of all leftist things. That which the left wants to ban, they first call damaging to the environment. Indeed, crypto does require a lot of energy. So does the general banking economy writ large. But of course, you're the left. You don't have to do a comparative analysis. You can just point to the total energy used, and that's your evidence that crypto causes the destruction of the entire Earth, right? But the fact that these articles are appearing with relative frequency among elite circles indicates that the establishment might be gearing up for a ban on crypto. Does this force you to sell crypto if you're a little, if you're a private person like me that owns some Bitcoin and some Ethereum, inside the crypto net? No, not really. But it will certainly affect the stock prices, because once something becomes legal and gets attached to big lawsuits that can be brought against banks and everyone else who's a nice juicy target for an IRS audit, all of a sudden the cryptocurrency becomes a liability, and the big money rollers who have it on their books are going to dump it in the market. In which case, you're going to see the demand side of crypto totally collapse. Also, another indication that crypto might be a little overvalued, NFTs. Come on. People are paying thousands of dollars for something that is transparently nothing just because NFTs have the crypto label on them. That is a big red flag. The existence of NFTs is an indication that the market might be overvalued. Now, does that mean that the crypto market is overvalued? No, not necessarily. I'm still obtaining crypto. I have Entropy give me part of my proceeds in crypto. It's perfectly fine. I have crypto to use it, and I have crypto to hedge. If you buy crypto, understand what you're doing. When you invest in crypto, you are betting against the dollar. That is why people are buying crypto. The best way to bet on the dollar is not to exclusively buy crypto. The best way to bet against the dollar is to buy a little bit of everything. Buy a little bit of crypto, buy a little bit of real estate, buy a little bit of gold, both held and in the hand, if you will. Buy a little bit of stock market, and that's your hedge. We do know that the dollar is probably going down the tubes, but if we're honest, we don't actually know what's going to happen. Only one or two of those alternative markets is going to maintain when the fiat currency finally hits the wall. All other alternatives are going down to zero or near a zero. So don't hedge only into crypto. Make sure that you're playing with money that you can lose. I can't emphasize that enough. Hedge with crypto, don't just buy in. Please, please, please. Okay, sorry, digression aside, I just felt like I had to say that. Paul Cornelius, damn it, I missed the stream. What did I miss? Hee. That's like the comment, Paul, you always give me. Well, you missed a lecture about the collapse of BreadTube, aristocratic virtue, and then last things trying to embarrass me over Warhammer 40k. And then, general questions I usually answer on stream. Thanks, Paul. Always nice to see you here. Oh, whoa, feature bug for 100? Not so sure what currency denominations that is, but I'm going to assume that is a large super chat. Any thoughts about creating community where a core of people worked for a self-owned corporation? Would that be too tight coupling? No, I don't think so. I think doing co-ops is a great idea, and I think having a tightly owned corporation is a great idea. They're pretty robust if they're small enough. They are a target for lawsuits. They have to have HR departments. They're subject to all of that stuff. I would generally recommend really, really watching out who you hire and how many people you hire because of that. And if you do go the co-op route for your tightly held corporation, your financial project will also take upon it an artistic dimension, because I can't wait for the reality of right-wing co-ops, just as they did in the 30s, beating the living stuffing out of idiotic anarchist ones. Mondragon should be the humiliation of all leftists. A Franco-era project started by a Catholic priest outlived every shit-tier communist hellhole they created for the last 70 years. Mondragon isn't perfect, but I wouldn't mind having a more newfangled edition of the left can't organize because they're a bunch of sociopaths to just re-up that meme, to put that meme back into general consciousness. So I think that's a great idea. Look, if you work for a corporation, you have to come, whether it's your own business, whether it's whether it's Microsoft or Intel or whatnot, you have to come to terms with the fact that that income stream might not be permanent. And so hedge, right? There are no guarantees in terms of income. It's not that the previous ways of making money are uncertain, but new ones aren't. It's just that the general amount of uncertainty in everyone's lives has gone up across the board. Crypto is uncertain, gold is uncertain, US currency is uncertain, real estate is uncertain. There is no dry ground in any of this. And because of this, you just have to hedge and do a crazy project like that if you want to. It is no more secure, in my opinion, than getting a job at some kind of 100-year-old blue chip corporation. Yeah, I mean, it sounds great. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to go on just so I don't completely run out of zhuzh here. Oh, I'm already over time. Oh, God, I need to get through these super chats because I still have a group of super chats from last stream. Aristocratic Owl for $10, USA. There are two great small publishing houses who support dissidents. One is called Antelope Hill. The other is house called Imperium Press. Imperium Press has a great podcast, and you can find their plugs on the publishing site. Well, I definitely want to look into it. I've heard of Imperium Press. I haven't heard of Antelope Hill. I'm not really in the market at this moment for a publisher. I have thought about turning the letters series that I'm currently writing into sort of a Substack that I read on my YouTube channel, because I think that might be a better way of making consistent edited content. In which case, my Distributism series, Always Prophesized, Never Delivered, could be part of that, where I just write out small little essays and those become the chapters of a book or something like that. That's something I've seriously considered, and so maybe down the line I would be in the market for a publisher. But thank you very much. I have heard of Imperium Press, and I do believe that they're great. So yes, thank you very much. Jacaranda Plus for Australian $20. I do like saying $20 it is. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think my media content has moved to being 90% dominated by the Wiggles. So we're all being infiltrated, but by Australian ways of pronouncing things, or jokes about how Australians pronounce things. And at this point, I'm a walking encyclopedia of Wiggles lore. I mean, because what else are you gonna do, right? I have been inspired by Academic Agent's concept of becoming a 10 and creating a class of elites. I'm pursuing a career in the film industry. However, I struggle to see how I will succeed without being corrupted by my peers. Any tips? My tip is to be driven by a passion and an artistic vision, and to walk in a parallel direction to the movement of power. Right? So the way people get corrupted is that they have their beliefs and you have the cathedral's beliefs, and are constantly pounding like this. Right? So the undercover dissident is eventually ground down through erosion. So Jacarandus Plus, I literally did an entire series like this. This series might need to be updated, called, I think the title was something like Surviving Progressive Institutions, where I literally discussed the phenomenon of being undercover in a world that's mostly progressive. And I have some tips in that video series. But suffice to say, what you want to do is either be totally enthralled and passionate about a reactionary idea that is going to drive your artistic career, relative to which the platitudes of your progressive colleagues are just going to kind of, run to the side as the rehearsed dross that they are, right? That's one option. The other option is to put your own reactionary ideas and principles in language that is difficult for your colleagues to understand, and that seemingly goes parallel to their own understanding of their principles. Those are my two tips, right? Develop a sort of apathetic quality. Ask questions as if you're studying some kind of weird alien culture. That's what you have to do in these progressive institutions, is you have to pretend like you've been deposited on an alien planet. And you're meeting a bunch of really weird locals with really crazy ideas, and you get to learn about these people. And why would you take them seriously? Because it's very unlikely that anything they talk about is going to be, a serious option for you and your community. Okay, so 99 Iron Duke for Australian $5. So you always recognize people who, are both on the Franklin stream and yours. I've been subscribed to you for years. One good thing about streams over video is that it allows more interaction with your audience. Yeah, well, sure thing. I totally agree that it does allow for more interaction with my audience. I like to think that I am becoming more fluent in the English language, but being a consistent flubber of English syllables, I can't say that I'm going to overcome my affliction anytime soon. And in the meantime, for my own ego health, I can't imagine going forward in this world if I can't pour scorn onto streamers. Whether I'm sorry, right-wingers included. Being a video essayist, I just have to think that what I do is worth more than those filthy streamers. And it doesn't hurt that streaming is sort of the language of BreadTube more than video essaying ever was, for honest. And I'm too much of a pretentious elitist not to want to have a dismissive attitude towards streaming. So I can't do this too much or I'll become what I hate. Okay, I'm so close to being done. All I have to do is get through the super chats from the fail streams. Here we go. Super chat 1, Pringle Dingle for $5. You said that you're completely confident that there is a God. Is this confidence in theism or just deism? Well, I mean, there's levels of it, right? I'm absolutely confident that in the theistic Aristotelian sense, there is some kind of God, because there just has to be, if there is some kind of common point of truth, right? There just has to be, if there's some kind of common point of truth in reality that we all have reference to. There's too many imponderables if there isn't. Now, that being said, in the philosophical sense, if I say there's some kind of philosopher's God, I'm really not saying much, right? Then comes the next question. This is sort of the theism question. Is there a necessary God that deserves to be called God? Because, of course, this ultimate entity that I talk about that sort of controls truth, it could be chaos, right? In which case, not only would the ultimate truth of the universe be unworthy of the title of God, in some sense the ultimate truth of the universe would be unworthy of itself. The universe would seem to be promising some ultimate truth that it couldn't possibly deliver, because what ultimately stood behind it, chaos, is something that by definition can't contain any meaning or any reason for itself. The other alternative is that this God that defines truth and meaning in the universe is so far beyond us as to be completely incoherent to human understanding. And that's another possibility that I can't deny as being something that's true. I'm not so sure really how I would relate to a universe like that. It's not chaos necessarily, in that it might contain meaning, but it's not a meaning that we would ever really have any contact with. And the fourth possibility is that there is a truth to the universe, and this does have the truth of this universe that is consistent and eternal, and it explains the universe in its entirety in the Heideggerian sense. This also has a degree of meaning that is deeply understandable to us as personal beings. And to my mind, this last step pretty much is equivalent to there being something like a personal God, or something so much like a personal God that it would be very, very hard to distinguish it from a personal God. I am very, very confident that we can go all the way to that third option, that God that is so much like a personal God, it is virtually undistinguishable. I just don't think the ultimate truth of this universe is chaos, or so ultimately unknowable that we can't possibly touch it, even in passing. I'm very confident of that. Admittedly, that last step is much less an extension of the proofs of God and much more an intuitive step, but it's an intuitive step that I'm very, very confident in making. And if you're aware of mathematical truths, they all rely on an intuitive embracing of the core axioms that they stand on, right? The belief in a Christian God is sort of a further act of faith, and I have to admit it. It stems from the belief that any personal God that had a deep care about humanity would at some point make himself manifest in history. And the further extension that I see that this God is manifested in the history of the ancient Israelites and in the person of Jesus Christ. These last two propositions are incredibly historically contingent. They are nowhere near as robust as is my very confident belief in the ultimate personal God that you could call more philosophical. And my deep belief in Catholicism has to at some level at this rate come down to an intellectual commitment that you could call faith. And I'm not going to get into the difference between faith and blind faith here. There's more here, but I just can't get into it. Pringle Dingle. I already answered that one. Pay Subifi for $5. The Pacific Northwest is outrageously pricey with harsh lockdown. Although I have a great job in the city, should a mid-20s guy stay for money or leave for principles? I don't think you should leave any place for purely principles. I think principles should influence your decision on where to leave or stay, but I'm not convinced that the people who homestead a livable reality inside cities are doing something that's fundamentally less principled than the homesteaders in the rural areas. The fundamental thing to remember at all times is that you are homesteading. If you're an urbanite, you're trying to find a community in the urban areas. If you're a rural person homesteading, your goal is to make your rural community not necessarily more based. Typically, they're already conservative or right-wing to some extent, but you're trying to make them more thick, more intellectual, more what academic agent would call the tens, right? In either case, we are homesteading. So it isn't so much a question of principle, but it is a question of fit. And the good thing about your situation as a guy in his mid-20s, you've got a lot of time to make mistakes. I can't give you any specific advice right now because uncertainty in 2021 is through the roof. All I can say is stay agile. Stay agile, stay agile, stay agile. Never be adverse to moving. If something's not working for you in terms of finding your core identity, finding your core community, finding a wife, or beginning a family, that's when you should start thinking about moving. That's when you should start thinking about a change of careers. But without knowing that you think those things are impossible, I can't tell you to move. I've lived in both Portland and Seattle, and I was able to find wonderful based communities there. And there are similarly based communities in Canada as well. You can find them if you really look. And the harder they are to find, the thicker they tend to be, very ironically. And in a sense, it was much easier to find a mate having that community background than it was if I was in the middle of some farming community where very, very few young people in their 20s even stayed. Moreover, young people who were interested in kind of a more nerdy guy like myself, right? I don't know. I think, I would really restate the problem that way. Nerve AMV Maker for $20. Coming from more traditionally Catholic perspective, what are your thoughts on the Soren Kierkegaard type of Christianity, particularly his views on the leap of faith being the solution to the absurdism of modernity? So I'm going to confess here that I have never... Well, okay, hold on. Have I read... If I have read Soren Kierkegaard, it was a very long time ago in that self-same philosophical circle that read the dialogues of Plato and Aristotle. And unlike the dialogues of Plato or the writings of Aristotle, these neither stuck in my mind nor encouraged me to reread them from time to time. And so right now I'm looking at Soren Kierkegaard and I can only describe him in the broadest sense. But I will say that in order to become a person of faith, it requires some kind of commitment that goes beyond doubt. You kind of saw this in my last answer about my certainty about God. There was a departure from pure procedure. And I'm not so sure how to properly describe this because I am leaving myself open to an attack from an atheist in some sense. I don't think it's a... What do the leftists say? I don't think it's a good faith attack, as they say. But it is an attack that's used to dissuade many a bugman for ever looking into things that are deeper, whether they are religion or even ideas that came from more than 100 years ago. There's something that kind of... I don't know the answer to this question, but I think Soren Kierkegaard is on to something. And I hear this a lot when I listen to Curtis Yarvin in a few of his recent... podcast before his dear wife passed away. Rest in peace and prayers. Where he was talking about the deep difficulty of becoming a sincerely religious person in the modern world. He seemed to believe that it required a lot of LARP. I don't think it does, but it does require a lot of leap. That sounded like a Jesse Jacksonism there, but again, this issue is a little bit too deep to get into at 12:20 when I'm trying to end the stream. But what I'm trying to say here is that modernity needs to be confronted, and we cannot confront this with some kind of minimalistic way of going through the equations and evidence only, or you're a bug man who has no prior beliefs. We can't deal with anything authentic in that way. And I don't think taking a leap of faith or just committing to an ideology that you see having sort of a spiritual resonance with you is the LARP that Curtis Yarvin implies it must be. I don't think even Curtis would use those exact words, but that seemed to be sort of a lurking implication behind a lot of what he was saying. So I'm going to kind of punt on that. Anyway. Thank you very much, Nerve AMV Maker. Excellent question. I wish I had more time to answer it. I just don't. James Reich, massive F's in chat. Well, yes, $25 for telling me that I failed. Thank you so much for the contribution. I really appreciate it. This contribution makes me want to shut down Google Super Chats all the more, so they're not getting 30% of $25 just to tell me that Linux OBS interface sucks and no longer connects to their ever-shifting Google API. Thank you very much. I know it's probably Google's fault more than it is Linux's one, but it's still very, very hard to not blame the Penguin now that it's working seamlessly on Windows after an automatic update. I mean, what's so hard about running an automatic update for Linux users, right? Is it really so hard to automatically check in with apt-get without me actually literally running a cron tab to do that? I mean, I want to flip open my thing, launch OBS, and I don't want to find out the thing's out of date 1 hour into an hour live stream where my stream all of a sudden stops working. Anyway, here's a lead Bolin for another $5. Thank you very much. Reboot your stream. You're failing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, I fail. I suck. And for everyone who wants to see me fail in real time, I will include the links to the unlisted videos for the first 2 failures. You will hear me give the same spiel you just heard in this video in slightly different words on the fail streams. So you can see, if you really want to see how the sausage is made, you can see how much of my lectures at the beginning of these live streams is actual notes and how much is just ad hoc me just going for it. Normac Carmen, did you become Christian through logic or through divine intervention of some kind? Are you a Hegelian? Ugh. Because you mentioned dialectics a lot. Critical history. Okay, I mean... Okay, first, I became Christian through reading apologetics, through moving down just that process I more or less outlined through the first chat. Gödel Asher Bach was a huge thing that got me onto the deism track. Really more Kurt Gödel, but learning about that made me doubt my philosophical materialism. And from there, I kind of began a slow downward spiral to full theism, right? As for religious experiences, I have never had a true religious experiences. I have had weird moments that have happened to me. I have had moments of deep religious inspiration where I felt for a moment like something was reaching out. Certainly not anything supernatural. I have heard other people describe their supernatural experiences to me, and I even have an essay about someone telling me about a supernatural experience. Now, I always feel a little bit guilty about that essay, because in order to make the prose seem tight enough, what I did was I took like 3 different people, and I merged them all into the same person. So the stories and all seemed like they were coming from a common place, right? But those stories came together to make kind of an impression of me listening to religious experiences of other people and me kind of projecting my own theology onto that. And that's all I've really been able to do is hear about other people's religious experiences, and then for me to retroactively, project my understanding of the universe onto those. Probably a lot of materialists will think that that's methodologically irresponsible. Come on, people. That's what people have been doing for most of human history. Probably that's what most poetry, that's what most novels are. I imagine that most novels are simply the projection of a more systematic way of looking at the world onto a more poetic way of experiencing it. I don't think I really experience the world in a very poetic way, even though I get glimpses of it, and as such I'm not really the kind of mind that's amenable to religious experience. As for Hegelian dialectics, I've read one Hegel book, Reason and History. I understood none of it. I got glimpses here and there, but I have to say, Hegel has come up again and again and again, where his constructions and his imagistics that he uses in an informal way seem like in the moment the best way to describe what's going on in a useful, if nothing else, in a metaphorical sense. So I am very open to Hegelianism, even though I really dislike Marx, and I really believe that dialectic materialism abused the hell out of the German idealistic school it comes out of. I have read Marx again and again and again, and I'm always left underwhelmed. It's not just because I hate communism. It's not just because I find his followers insufferable. I mean, probably there's a little bit of that in there. But I do really feel like I've given dialectic materialism the go, and it really doesn't get me. I don't know. He's an evocative thinker. He has a lot of good analogies, just like his predecessor Hegel. But that is what it is. Okay, guys, please don't give me more super chats. I need to pack this in. I need to pack this in. Okay, I don't see any more super chats. Okay, well, we got super chats anyway. Feature bug for 100 units. Do you believe Christianity and Catholicism is the only way? Could other religions be worshipping the same God? I do believe Christianity and Catholicism is the only way, in a manner of speaking, in that it is the only correct way. This does not mean that other people not directly in contact with Catholicism could not also be worshiping God. And it also does not mean that there is no salvation outside of the church proper. There is no such a thing as salvation outside of the church absolute. And the church proper and the church absolute are not the same thing. Which is how my quasi-modernist but still orthodox Catholic self makes this, squares this circle, so to speak. Richard M.W.D., great stream, politics, God, and financial advice. Thank you very much. But since I've given you politics, God, and financial advice, I'm going to excuse myself out of the poetry ending that I usually tack on to these things, because I just don't have the time. I'm going to kind of end this here, quick, making sure that I'm not getting any more super chats. Nope. Okay, I will say here, everyone have a wonderful rest of the week. Blessings to everyone. Stay healthy in the physical sense. Stay healthy in the spiritual sense. Keep your options open. Keep cautious and keep curious. An uncertain world means we need to be robust. An uncertain world means we need to be present. And so I'd like to pray, kind of cursorily before I end this stream, that everyone finds this wisdom and finds this way inside our troubled times. And with that, I'd like to wish everyone a great week and a blessed rest of the night. Goodbye.